Controversy. Shifters Forever Worlds. Always After Dark, Book 1. Written by Elle Thorne. Narrated by Megan Kelly. Chapter 1. Vittorio Tiero, called Vax by his friends and family, dragged his ass in the back door of his club after dark. Vax was the alpha of the Tiero shifter tribe in North America. The rest of his family ran the European branch. He entered the back room of After Dark, taking a second to lean against the wall and rest. He inhaled the familiar scent of the place. Home. Finally. Several days ago, he'd gotten a call to prevent Kane, a bear shifter, from being killed by rovers, mercenary shifters who did dirty work. Saving Kane had solidified Vax's alliance with the Bear Canyon Valley shifters. Shifters were never neutral. They were either friends or they were enemies. And enemies rarely became friends, though some were more like frenemies. If anything, an enemy became even more of an enemy as time passed. The trip home from Bear Canyon Valley had been long. It had felt longer than the trip up. Probably because the whole way there he had been more concerned about keeping Kane out of harm's way. Vax was hella tired and hadn't taken a second to recuperate. He'd traveled directly from Bear Canyon Valley to get back home. No stops, no food, no sleep. Practically straight through from Bear Canyon Valley, North Dakota to Dallas, Texas. He was glad he'd been able to help. His alliance with the Bear Canyon Valley clan was vital. Though Vax's bleeding had stopped not long after he left Bear Canyon Valley, he had other injuries. The lacerations had sealed, leaving behind scars that became fainter with every passing hour, but the bruises and bone fractures were still painful. Rest. He needed a whole hell of a lot of rest. He locked the deadbolt behind him. He'd get a few hours' sleep before the club opened for business. That would tide him over. "It's about time you returned." Natalia. Her tone was barely above a whisper. Her voice didn't need to be any louder, not with his tiger hearing. Natalia's ire with his absence was evident. She hadn't showered or changed. She was in uniform, clearly the one from last night, judging from the smell his tiger senses picked up. Outside, the sun was well up. Evidently, she'd been obsessing about his whereabouts. Again. Her possessiveness was getting tiresome and was totally unwarranted. He bit back his temper and took a deep breath before responding, his blue eyes vivid icebergs of chilling emotion, his jaw clenched. "Why? Is there a problem? Something happened while I was gone?" For emphasis, Vax pulled out his cell, checked it, and showed it to her. "I see no texts or calls saying that there's an emergency." He shoved the phone back into his pocket and left his hand there, clenched tight in a fist. He didn't owe her any explanations. What he did was none of her business, and she'd be better off if she realized that no matter who wanted them together, and no matter what she wanted, he wasn't inclined to feel the same way. He had no chemistry with Natalia. Sure, she was beautiful, curvy, downright stunning. That didn't mean he had to bed or mate her. Turning his back on her, he made his way down the dark hallway, his tiger vision requiring no lighting. He could hear her following closely behind. He scented her anger, though he didn't need to scent it to know she was irritated with him. That was her usual MO. Always angry, always pouting because she wasn't getting her way. She hadn't changed since she was a little girl. He cursed his father for having arranged her stay. He cursed himself for agreeing to it, giving her a job at After Dark, allowing her to work alongside his sisters, if only to keep the peace between their tribes. "Vax, stop!" She put her hand on his shoulder, her claws digging into his flesh. He didn't wince or show he'd been hurt earlier. The first thing she'd do was tell his tribal sister tigresses he was wounded. He didn't need the drama.
What?
He turned slowly to face her, shrugging her hand off his body.
I'm tired. I need to get to bed. What's up?
Don't you think you owe me an explanation about your whereabouts? You can't just vanish for days. She flipped her blonde hair behind her and cocked a perfectly arched brow, her light eyes gleaming with angry fire.
Natalia.
Vax drew in a deep breath.
I don't answer to anyone. I had business to take care of.
He didn't want to hurt her feelings, but no matter how many times he'd told her they wouldn't be mates, she refused to accept it. Maybe more bluntness was called for. Nah, the hell with it. He was too tired to deal with any drama right now.
Tell everyone I'm back. I'll be in my quarters until opening time tonight. Let them know I'm sleeping and I won't be answering my phone.
He turned from her before she could give him an argument. After making a sharp right, he used his key for the elevator, taking it up. He leaned his forehead against the cool metal finish of the elevator, allowing the whirring sound of the machinery to calm him, to remind him he was home, that he'd be able to sleep fully. No more of the one eye open while he tried to catch a few minutes' nap like it had been on the road. Sleep on the road had been an epic adventure and failure. Here he could rest, knowing his building was as impenetrable as a fortress. A few moments later, with a ding and a whoosh, the elevator opened to another hallway leading to the penthouse. Vax and the rest of the Tiero owned the entire building, leasing out a few of the lower floors and keeping the rest for the Tiero businesses. The top floor, the 44th one, held his apartment and his office. He locked the door to his place, something he rarely did when at home. His door was always open to the rest of the tribe. After stripping his clothing off, he jumped into bed, the cool sheets providing comfort, the sunlight blocked by blinds. His club and his territory, as well as his tribe, should have been the only things on his mind. Being the alpha of a tribe of tigers and tigresses was no small thing in a metropolis the size of Dallas. There were always shifters encroaching on his territory, trying to stake a claim, looking to pick a fight or settle a grudge. That should have been the only thing on his mind, but it wasn't. A pair of brown eyes, a set of killer hips, and a curvy ass were at the forefront. Just as his eyes closed, his mind wandered to a dark-eyed, luscious brunette.
Callie.
Chapter 2. Calliope, Callie Rivera, clocked in at after dark, then went to the employee dressing room to check her appearance in the mirror. Yep, she looked as flustered and harangued as she felt. She'd just wrapped up typing a paper for her professor. What the hell had she been thinking when she decided to pursue her master's degree? I could have gotten a job, done the 9-to-5 thing, but no, here I am, the eternal college student. She shook her head at herself in the mirror, questioning her sanity, and pulled her tailored uniform down. Uniform was the wrong word. It was a sexy little evening number, just like all the rest of the uniforms she and the other hostesses had been provided. The Tiero didn't mess around. After-dark hostesses were better dressed than many of the patrons. There was no doubt this was a class act, a nightclub meant to rival the top nightclubs in the country as well as in Europe. After Dark may have dressed its employees in the classiest possible attire, but that wasn't the draw. The draw was Sanctuary, the enclosure housing an assortment of tigers, mostly white tigers, and had them on view for club patrons. Sanctuary was a glass and bar structure that took up the whole 43rd floor of one of the Tiero Tower's high-rises. One of two side-by-side buildings built for, owned by, and managed by the Tiero family. The glass glowed gold in the Texas sunsets. 5 glass-covered walkways connected the buildings, allowing occupants to travel from building to building without venturing outside. The Tiero Towers ranked amongst the most extravagant and coveted buildings in Dallas. Tiero Tower 1 had a floor dedicated to a habitat created for tigers. Partiers from far and wide made After Dark a must-see on their visit to the Dallas Metroplex. Callie adjusted her outfit again. The dress, uniform, was much sexier than she was typically comfortable with, attracting attention that wasn't always welcome, but the money was good. And hey, it's not like I'm stripping or anything. If she'd been slinging wings and beer, she'd be wearing less, and it'd be less classy. At least here, Mr. Vittorio, she corrected herself. Vittorio didn't like the employees using formalities when they talked to him.
Not Mr. Tiero, just call me Vittorio,
he always said. She noticed his sisters called him Vax without permission, but she wasn't about to do the same. Heat washed over Callie's body at the thought of the gorgeous owner of the club. Stupid, really. Why did she think he'd ever look twice at her? Okay, she wasn't a dog. No, far from that. But all the blonde-haired beauties who worked here, like Natalia, were far more likely to get his attention. Yeah, well, whatever. She had her degree to worry about, not lusting after the boss. The very hot boss, with dreamy dark eyes, black hair, and a face that makes you think the only place it belongs is right above your pussy. Or your face, she corrected herself. Oh yeah, the man's face was sexiness personified. Don't forget the body, she reminded herself. That too, the fine-ass body she'd love to worship with her tongue. Oh geez, for real. Control yourself, woman. She would have fanned herself, but right that moment, speak of the devil, Natalia walked in. For some reason, Natalia hated her. Callie didn't get it. She'd never done anything to the tall blonde. She'd never been rude or even unkind. In fact, Callie had never exchanged more than 3 words with her in a single sitting. It was usually just a hi or something to that effect. Callie. Natalia's sneer took some of the pretty off her face. Hi. Callie tried to muster up a smile. Natalia fluffed her hair and left the room. Anna walked in right after. Callie exhaled a whoosh of a sigh. Where were you? You're late, she told her best friend. I see you were busy with your other best friend, Anna teased. She hates me. She's as dangerous as the tigers upstairs at Sanctuary. Anna laughed at Callie's description of Natalia. She's probably more dangerous. A jealous woman, or, you know that saying, a woman scorned. What are you talking about? Callie whispered, looking around to make sure none of the dressing rooms in the back were occupied. She clearly has a thing for Vittorio, Anna smirked, and he spends way more time than he should with his eyes on you. You're crazy. Look at me. She waved her arms around her body as if she were a game show hostess. And look at the figure that just walked out of here. Pshaw. He's not checking me out. Trust me. Natalia had curves for sure, but Callie had them in spades, and then some. What made Anna think Vittorio liked this much curviness? Whatever. Callie laughed and pulled her top up a notch, covering some of her cleavage. It was way too low cut for comfort. Leave it alone. You're going to kill your tips. Tipping was allowed, and hostesses benefited from that, as they almost seemed to serve as tour guides, taking patrons from one area to another, facilitating, assuring good service. After Dark took up the entire 42nd floor, so it was an easy place to get lost in and to lose someone else in. Not to mention the club had a kitchen in the back, and the patrons on occasion needed sustenance. A chef was there to provide a multiple-starred selection to choose from. Anna continued. Plus, you have a nice set. No reason to hide them. She slapped at Callie's hands to get her to quit pulling the material up. He's back, you know. Callie's heart skipped a beat. It did more than skip a beat. It pounced up into her throat, grabbed hold tightly, and made her voice seem like a cartoon character's. Who's back? Who's back? Anna mocked her, batting her eyelashes. It was Callie's turn to smack Anna. She swallowed hard to kill the lump in her throat. "Quit that. How do you know? You saw him?" Neither of them had to define the him part. It was clear. "No, but I heard." Anna was floor supervisor, so she would know about anything a lot sooner than Callie would. She'd missed him. They didn't talk much, but still, just knowing he was around, with his warm smile, those sexy eyes, and a demeanor that warned the world he was like a jungle cat in waiting. She sighed. Thinking of jungle cats reminded her that the tiger she visited nightly was missing. It was bad enough Vittorio was out of town, but with the large tiger gone too, she felt a loneliness that struck her to the core. It was strange. For all the great friendship she had with Anna, there was something about the large cat that was better than sipping a hot cup of tea in the middle of a blizzard. Other than seeing Vittorio again, the only thing that would make her day complete would be if her favorite tiger was back, the white tiger in Sanctuary. The huge tiger seemed to be the ruler of the other tigers, always coming close to her in the enclosure, listening to her while she talked about the silliest things. The large white tiger with the brilliant blue eyes that growled when other felines approached him and Callie, yet made the softest soothing sounds when it was just the two of them. She should have come in early to see if the tiger was back, but she couldn't because she'd had a late appointment with her professor. She'd asked Vela and the other two members of management, Sophie and Lila, if they knew what had happened to the large white tiger, but all they'd said was he was at the vet's, that he'd had to be taken there. No one knew what had happened to him. Then Callie asked what the tiger's name was. Vela had given her a strange look, then said, "None of the tigers are named." There was no way Callie would be able to sneak down now to search for him. There'd be no time unless it was a slow night at after dark. She didn't think that would happen. She'd seen the line stretching out the front doors on the bottom floor and into the street. The beautiful tiger would move his ears, twitching them back and forth, his head cocking this way or that the whole time she'd talk, as if he really was attentive, listening and comprehending. His eyes would glow with knowledge and understanding. She missed him. She missed sharing with him. If he wasn't back, she was going to start asking questions. Chapter 3. Vax ran his fingers through his hair, then pulled his chair closer to the mahogany table. The chair rolled silently, the wood armrests not quite touching the glossy, expensive table. He looked out the ceiling-to-floor windows in his boardroom. The lights of Dallas glinted and winked, evidence the city life was in full swing. Things were hopping in the moneyed metroplex. People readied for another weekend of excess and pleasure. And the Tiero family would be reaping the results. He'd barely gotten any sleep. After waking to the incessant buzzing of his cell phone, clearly his request to let him sleep uninterrupted was not being heeded, he'd showered and dressed. Lila, Vela, Sophie, and Natalia had insisted on a meeting. That was why he sat in his boardroom now, fully dressed, ready for the evening. The ladies were all in their glitzy, sequined, glittery club dresses, ready to get downstairs to work, managing and assisting in operations of the club as soon as they finished with their meeting. This was a family operation, after all. What else could he do but call the meeting? They'd wanted it, insisted on catching up. They were his tribe sisters, with the exception of Natalia, who was wearing out her welcome quickly. Why did he ever have a truce with her tribe? Yes, he was even beginning to second-guess that. It was a sign he was getting tired of Natalia's antics and her presence.
"Oh yeah, that's right, because allies are better than enemies."
Would she still be an ally? Would her tribe be his allies if he rejected her as his mate? The first thing he had to listen to at the meeting was that Sophie and Lila had heard rumors of trespassing shifters in their territory.
"I'll get a couple of guys on that,"
he assured his sisters.
"Anything else?"
He looked at Vela, then Sophie, and finally Lila. He didn't bother looking at Natalia, who wasn't a member of their tribe. It was a courtesy on Vax's part he allowed her to be in attendance at their meeting. That, and he didn't want friction with her father's tribe. "Where were you?" Sophie asked, pushing her platinum blonde hair behind her ears. She was an orange tigress taking after her mother. "Yeah," Lila added, her bravery bolstered by Sophie's question. Lila was a white tigress, a darker white than he, her hair blonde with a hint of red undertones. He glared at Natalia. He was sure she'd put them up to this. She'd probably egged them on about not knowing where their brother was, probably made statements about Vax not being a good alpha if he took off without notice. Never mind he'd had extra tribe members come in and patrol the club and the building regularly. Never mind his tribe sisters could kick major ass. Nope, never mind all that. Natalia had a mission to know where he'd been. And he was sure she'd manipulated his sisters into this. He'd known Natalia since she was a bratty, pouty, cute little girl, spoiled rotten by an overindulgent father because she was the only daughter. Natalia didn't hold his gaze for long. A guilty look passed over her face, and she turned away, her eyes focused on the city in the background.
"Anything else?"
His tone was clipped, curt, to the point. "My father wants an answer." Natalia pouted. She was relentless. Normally he'd admire the trait, but it was becoming tiresome. He didn't need to ask what her father wanted an answer to, and he didn't think it was her father who wanted the answer as much as it was Natalia. She wanted to solidify the merger. He nodded.
"I'll contact your father in due time."
"Why don't you tell me, and I'll tell him for you?" She responded, a coy smile on her face. Sophie and Lila rolled their eyes. Vela ignored Natalia's statement in favor of looking at paperwork. It wasn't that his sisters didn't like Natalia. They liked her just fine. It was that they didn't want to see Vax pressured into a mating any more than they would have wanted to be. So they stood behind him, not insisting on a mating, not worried about changing the status quo. There was nothing wrong with the status quo as far as Vax was concerned. He liked his life as it was, and had no interest in being mated to a tigress he didn't feel a spark with.
Spock.
He shuffled some paperwork in front of him, pretending to be absorbed in it, while his mind wandered to an ebony-haired, onyx-eyed, curvilicious body he couldn't get out of his system, or his mind, or his tiger's heart. Was Callie scheduled to work tonight? He didn't make the schedule, and he'd forgotten to look at it. He wasn't going in this evening. His body needed more rest, the kind of rest only Sanctuary could offer. He shuffled through the paperwork. No schedule in this pile. Would she come see him if she was scheduled? She visited Sanctuary every night she worked, after last call, after the doors were shut, after the last patron had left, while the cleaning crew was in the club. She broke the rules being there. His rules specifically, that humans were not to be in the Sanctuary viewing area during the hours after dark was closed. He looked at Vela.
"The schedule for tonight?"
She pored over the pile in front of her, took a sheet out, and handed it to him with a knowing glance. She knew. He knew she knew. He knew all his sisters knew to one degree or another. But since there was nothing between him and Callie, they never said anything. He knew if there had been something between them, things would be a whole hell of a lot different. First, because she was a human. Second, because for an alpha like him, it was recommended marriages be political, if not financial mergers. Vax rifled through the papers and discovered, yes, Callie was scheduled tonight. He fought to keep his pulse even, knowing all the tigresses in the room would be able to read any reaction he had. Keeping things under this kind of control had taken its toll on him, though he had become a master at controlling his pulse and masking the scent of his desire. He invested in Hunter's block in wholesale quantities. For starters, he never knew when he'd need the block if he were trying to hide his presence from other shifters. And it had come in very handy in concealing, somewhat, the scent of the depth of his emotions for Callie. He turned to Vela.
"Empty out Sanctuary. I want some alone time in there tonight. I'm going to the roof for a few."
He stood. The roof was the place where he could meditate for a moment. He could get his bearings, center himself. Natalia rose too, perhaps thinking she would accompany him. He gestured for her to sit.
"Enjoy some girl time."
She frowned, flopping back down sideways in the plush chair, causing the chair's armrests to bump into the table's edge, leaving a scratch and not acknowledging the damage she'd done. Bela shook her head almost imperceptibly. Without hiding his supernatural speed, pushing his still-tired muscles and his still-hurting insides and bones, he zipped out of the room and up the stairs to the rooftop. The roof was off-limits to anyone who wasn't a Tiero or invited by one. Even the Tiero employees couldn't be there without permission or a reason. The roof had a covered pool, a hot tub, his gym, and a totally enclosed glass room from which he enjoyed the view of the storms that struck the city from time to time. Being on the rooftop in the middle of the lightning flashes of a thunderstorm was a high for Vax that rivaled most of his favorite pleasures. Vax took a deep breath. Making a 360 slowly, he surveyed the city, using his senses to see if he could find anything amiss. Nothing. He sensed no strange or foreign shifters. Unless they were using block, he'd ask around to see if there'd been rumors of trespassers in his territory. He made his way back down to his office and opened a hidden panel, revealing a secret door leading to Sanctuary. Sanctuary had two entrances, a hidden one from his office and the public entrance from the main dance floor in After Dark. Patrons of After Dark would visit the bar-enclosed Sanctuary to view the large felines. Shifters from afar, friendly to the Tiero, would visit and enjoy the plush vegetation, large lagoon, and intricate cave system. When he wasn't in his penthouse or on the rooftop, Vax spent much of his time at Sanctuary. He took the narrow staircase 2 steps at a time, pressed a button above his head just before he shifted, then entered one of the caves through the doorway the button had opened. He flexed, his bones creaking from stretching and rearranging, and a few seconds later, he was in his white tiger skin, padding his way silently through the maze of caves serving as the tiger's playground during both the daytime and while the club was open. Sanctuary was empty as he'd requested. He stretched out on a large rock overlooking the entrance, laid his head on his paws, and let his body recuperate, while his heart waited for the curvy brunette Latina's nightly visit. Chapter 4. Another night, another shift over with. Callie and Anna were in the dressing room again, Callie's section clean and ready for the next night. She was done and ready to go. Grabbing her purse, she told Anna she'd find her later.
"Don't get caught,"
Anna whispered, knowing what Callie did every night when she snuck into Sanctuary. She told Callie she understood her need to visit the big cat. Callie blew her best friend a kiss and hurried out the door, avoiding the dance floor and main congregating areas, skimming around the perimeter of tables and staying close to the wall. She stole into Sanctuary before the cleaning crew could lock it up and hid behind a tree until she heard the clicking of the lock. Safe! She stepped out with trepidation, approaching the bars, straining to see in the dimness, hesitant the wrong cat could be in the area. That had happened once, and the strange tiger had roared so close to her ear, Callie had slipped and fallen. A second later, her white tiger had come to the rescue, sending the other tiger away. "Hey." She kept her voice low, not feeling odd at all about whispering to a tiger. She heard the rustling of leaves, the only giveaway something was approaching. Seconds later, the large cat padded through the undergrowth, pounced to a boulder near her, and sat. "Hey, where have you been?" She surveyed the cat's appearance. "I was worried about you. Someone said they thought you'd gone to the vet. I was more afraid they'd relocated you. That happens here, you know." The tiger cocked his head, as if listening and understanding her. "I don't mean to alarm you." He didn't look alarmed, not in the least, but he did look different. "What are those scars from? Did you get into a fight with another tiger? Is that why you were taken away to a vet?" Did you lose the fight?" He huffed as though scoffing at her question. Callie knew better, but she laughed softly at the sound. Pshaw, as if the cat could understand and respond. She sobered momentarily, thinking of how quickly she could lose her tiger friend. His presence here was at the mercy of the humans who housed him. Had they bought him? Did they buy tigers? Fury seized her. Was Vittorio responsible for her tiger's future? Yes, now she was beginning to think of him as her tiger, even though they had to be separated by bars because he might just actually kill her, or even eat her. God, my mind's all over the place tonight. What's wrong with me? The tiger shifted his massive head, studying her, a question in his pale eyes. His whiskers twitched, and his large tongue came out, licking at his lips. "Would you bite me if I put my hand near you?" She was asking herself more than the tiger, but still she spoke out loud. The tiger lowered his head, as if saying he wasn't a threat. "You don't understand me, do you?" She rubbed her palms over her jeans, her hands sweaty. Why was she nervous? "Of course you don't understand me." Callie chewed on her lip. "Do you?" She laughed derisively at herself. The tiger moved his head slightly, almost in an up-and-down motion, almost like nodding his head. "Oh, shit. Now I've gone and lost it because I'm interpreting your actions." She held her hand close to the bars. "I trust you." Yet she didn't put her hand between the two thick metal rods. Maybe I'm a liar, since I'm not exactly risking anything yet. She sucked in a deep breath. She should do it. She wanted to do it. Vax smiled inside. Callie was so brave, or crazy. Who in their right mind would put their hand near a tiger? Then again, she'd built a special relationship with him. A part of Vax could understand her confidence and her trepidation. With his tiger hearing, Vax heard her take a deep breath. His tiger could feel her pulse going haywire. Was that fear or excitement, or a bit of both? She closed her eyes, putting her hand even closer to the bars, then let her fingers touch the metal. When she actually made contact with the cold bars, she flinched slightly, then inched her fingers forward a notch. Vax breathed her scent in. She'd already imprinted on both Vax and his tiger, but having her so close was heady, like being on a drug high. He let a small puff of his breath out of his nostrils, letting her know he was nearby because she still hadn't opened her eyes. She let out a small, quiet gasp when the warmth of his breath touched her flesh. Then she opened her eyes. Her dark brown gaze met his with such trust. He knew trust and comfort, as well as security, were a big deal for Callie. She'd told his tiger she'd been raised in foster homes, that she'd been molested as a child. Vax had plans for that bastard as soon as she told him the man's name. She'd also told him about the insecurity of not knowing which home or school she'd be in the next month and the month after. He'd learned all about what Anna had come to mean to her. Vax had never been as close emotionally to a woman as he was to Callie, though he'd never exchanged more than a sentence or two with her when he was in human form. "You're not going to hurt me, are you, big guy? Why don't you have a name? It's not right to not have a name to go by. Do you have a tiger name? When other tigers are here with you, do they think of you or talk to you in tiger talk, and do you have names then?" Her curiosity brought another inward smile to Vax. He lowered his head, bringing it closer to her hand, allowing his cheek to rest on top of her fingers. "Oh, my God," she whispered. "Can I touch you?" Callie raised her hand, turning it so her fingers were against his cheek. She boldly leaned closer so she could touch his head farther back. "Do you think you could come closer? I'd like to touch your neck." Vax pulled himself up slowly and placed his entire body alongside the bars. Callie held her breath at the sheer size of him. Muscles rippled as he rose to his feet and stood against the bars. His massive body was lithe, yet completely solid and thick. She ran her fingers over his cheek, then pulled her hand out and placed it on the other side of the bar, letting her fingers trail over his thick neck, across his wide back. This was incredible. This majestic being was allowing her to touch him. Before she could allow fear to paralyze her, she brought her hand forward again, weaving in and out of the bars until she reached his head. Placing the backs of her fingertips against his cheek, she whispered, "Thank you," and knelt down near the front of him, touching the broad chest beneath his strong jaws. She raised her hand, putting it under his muzzle. "I wonder if you'll like this." She scratched under his chin. A rumble came from deep within the tiger's chest. The sound was deep, yet muted. "I guess you do." Leaning closer, she laid her other hand next to the first, almost cupping his jaw, scratching. "I don't know what I'd do if you weren't here. I love Anna, but I can't talk to her the way I talk to you. I wonder why." She heard a click near the doors. "Oh boy, I guess that means they've opened the doors again. They'll be locking up the place soon. I have to go." The tiger placed his broad head against the bars. Callie leaned in and did something so impulsive she even shocked herself. She kissed the tiger on his forehead. "I'll be back tomorrow night. Please be here." As if he could control where he was. She fought tears at the tiger's lack of control over his own life. Damn. It reminded her of life in foster homes. Vax lay back down on the rock, enjoying the solitude, her scent still on his fur, still in his nostrils. He understood what she meant, but he wished she didn't feel sadness on his account. Too bad she didn't know who and what he was. Would her feelings toward him or his tiger change if she knew the truth? Would she shun him as a freak of nature? His tiger growled at the idea she wouldn't want them.
"Easy. I just want us to be prepared, in case. You never know."
The tiger growled back, completely dissatisfied with Vax.
"I agree. Just chill. Let me take care of it."
Chapter 5. The next night, Vax was rested, though his body was still recuperating from its internal injuries. He had a quick meeting with his sisters, this time without Natalia. Thank goodness she'd decided to be elsewhere and give Vax a break. It was his first day back on the job after the trip to Bear Canyon Valley. He'd checked the schedule. Callie was supposed to work again, and Vax was doing the team meeting. May had called him to thank him for helping out and to let him know Kane and Astra, the bear shifter and his mate that Vax had gone to Bear Canyon Valley to help, were going to be staying in the valley. She'd asked Vax to stop by and visit, maybe even during the wedding.
"Don't be surprised if Grant and Chelsea send you an invite."
May had laughed, then hung up with a swift goodbye. Vax exhaled. It would be nice to have Callie as his +1 if he could go. His tiger practically purred in agreement, the sound vibrating deep in Vax's mind and lungs. He made his way down to Sanctuary, weaving between the tigers who were visiting, some of them waiting until after dark was open so they could shift in the front cave and then slip out into the viewing area that led to after dark. The visiting tigers were clearly eager to spend a night partying and socializing, maybe even mixing with the humans. Tiero shifters were allowed to have sex and fun and mingle with humans, just not take them as mates. Tieros used to take humans as mates long ago, but that had changed after a scandal a while back. After that incident, the Tiero Council had met and unanimously decided mating with humans offered too many complications. So it was put into code, no humans for mates. Vax had no clue what the incident had been. He'd asked once when he was younger, and the elders had blown him off. At the time, he hadn't pursued the matter. Now he wished he had. The code didn't used to bother Vax. In fact, he hadn't even given it a second thought, but now it didn't sit well with him because he found himself attracted to a human and interested in much more than a casual affair with her. When he was almost at the front cave, Vax felt a presence. He looked to his left.
Sophie.
She must have left the boardroom after their meeting and come directly here. She'd shifted into her tiger form, a rich orange and ebony blending in the greenery. He synced his mind with hers so they could communicate in the silent way shifters did when in their tigers. No other tiger in the area could join the conversation or overhear if those two didn't let them. That's how every shifter conversation was. Conversations stayed in their minds.
What's my baby sister doing here? Didn't feel like staying in the boardroom with the others?
After Vax's mother died, she had also been a white tiger like his father. Vax's father had remated, this time with a stunning reddish-orange tigress, who was Sophie, Lila, and Rafe's mother. Raphael, called Rafe, his younger brother, another white tiger, was always in rivalry with Vax. Rafe lived in Europe and ran the family businesses there, thankfully staying out of Vax's life. Of the tigresses currently at After Dark, Vela was the only one who was Vax's full sister. Vax and Vela had two more sisters who both lived in Europe, on occasion working and staying with Rafe.
I was worried about you, Vax.
Sophie the peacemaker, Sophie, the most tender-hearted one of all, the youngest of Vax's father's children.
I didn't mean to worry you, any of you, but I had business to take care of, a favor to repay, or pay, depending on your perspective.
Vax let her come close, rubbing against him. Sophie set her tigress forehead against his shoulder and nudged him, looking for comfort. He let her put her head under his neck and held her there. Her purring told him she was becoming more comforted.
Stop worrying so much, little sister.
And you can't say where you were?
She scratched one claw over the concrete, honing her already razor-sharp arsenal. Vax smiled inside. He couldn't see Sophie doing anything with those claws that would hurt anyone, ever. She was way too sweet.
It's not a state secret. I was in Bear Canyon Valley, but I'd appreciate it if it stays between us. Just us.
Meaning, don't tell Natalia?
Exactly.
He nudged her with his head, rubbing his cheek against hers.
She's here,
Sophie told him, letting him know Callie was there.
I know.
As if he wouldn't have known.
It bothers you the least of all my sisters.
That's because I knew Callie before they met her. We took a class together. If I hadn't liked her as much as I did, I wouldn't have told Anna to tell her to apply here.
He was glad she'd gotten Callie to apply. He tried to remember what life was like before Callie, but it seemed so pointless. Women. Excesses. It was like he'd been in a numbed, hazy state.
We should go.
He didn't want to discuss Callie anymore.
Okay, but there's one thing. The reason I wanted to talk to you here, privately, synced up.
He turned his brilliant Mediterranean blue eyes her way.
Watch out for Natalia. I don't think she's above hurting Callie. Seriously hurting her.
Noted.
He growled, restraining his anger, and padded off silently. A few paces later in the front cave, Vax shifted, stretched into his human form, cocked his neck in a circle to loosen it and become reaccustomed to his human skin and bones, then flipped a switch and was taken through a revolving door. He appeared suddenly in the corner of the viewing area, behind the vegetation. He stepped out, making for the stairs leading down to After Dark. He knew Callie was here. Her scent infiltrated his nostrils, making them flare, making his pulse rise briefly, just before he leveled it. Sexual energy entered his veins, coursing through his body, making flybys through his mind, visions of Callie in amazingly sexy ways. There were two things he couldn't contain. In his pants, his cock strained, filling, pressing, growing, the need for Callie too great to ignore. The other thing he couldn't contain was the smile that came to his lips.
Do I even need to ask what that smile's about?
Vela stepped out of the greenery to his left. What was this? Intercept Vax night?
Nice sneaking up on me.
He should have been paying better attention. His senses seemed to get all jacked up when he was about to see Callie. What was it with his sisters waylaying his progress toward after dark? First Sophie, now Vela.
Not going to answer?
She poked his arm. His oldest tribe sister was Vela, still younger than him, but older than the rest. They'd been born of the same mother, and that made them very close, a bit closer than he was with Lila and Sophie, and far closer than he was with Rafe, whom he hadn't seen since... Who knew how long? Years, many of them.
No reason to answer.
He didn't rise to her bait, even if she was teasing.
You know that some aren't happy. By others, you mean Natalia.
He knew where this was going. He'd heard it before. It seemed to be the theme of the day. Maybe leaving the women alone for a few days had given Natalia a chance to build some support or sympathy. Or maybe she'd just stirred up some fear, or some shit.
Yes, and she can rouse unrest. We're not to seek humans as mates. That's not the way of our tribe. I never said I was looking for a human to be my mate, but for the record, having a little fun with humans isn't against any of our codes.
Even though the last thing he wanted from Callie or with Callie was a casual dalliance. If he had something with her, he wanted it all.
Natalia's making noise, saying you won't be her mate, saying it's your feelings about a human that stand in the way. And you? What do you say?
He trained his gaze on her, scrutinizing her. She had circles under her eyes, and her blonde hair wasn't carrying its usual sheen. What was eating at her?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what I say. It almost doesn't matter what you say. We're only one branch of the Tiero. There are others. This sort of thing should be decided by consensus.
Anger flared in Vax's gut, seizing his intestines in a vice grip.
Consensus my ass.
Other shifters had human mates, and it was no issue. He was not going to have his emotions dictated by some archaic customs.
I'm alpha here. If I decide to do something, as long as it doesn't harm the tribe, I'm going to do it. If there's a problem, then I'll...
What was he going to say? I'll leave? He couldn't leave his way of life. He'd have to fight for what he wanted.
It's a moot point unless you have mate designs for the human.
She closed her eyes slightly, giving him a hard look.
Right?
Vax shook his head. He wasn't going to be drawn into this. He knew Vela was on his side, no matter what he chose. She was just trying to make him aware.
We're late for the meeting.
He held his hand out for her to precede him down the stairs. She gave him the look, the kind of look only a sister could, and turned. Her heels tapped down the steps. Chapter 6.
Vax is supposed to be back in time for opening. He's probably doing the team meeting,
Anna said. Every night before opening, Vittorio Tiero did a team meeting. Callie enjoyed his team building and charisma. She wasn't the only one. After Dark employees were loyal to him.
Let's go find out.
Anna opened the door, holding it for Callie.
It's meeting time.
She winked. Callie held her emotions in check, not reacting to Anna's teasing. She really preferred to keep her feelings to herself. She didn't want Vittorio to know. She didn't want anyone to know. This job was perfect for her schedule and school. Callie felt Vittorio's presence before she saw him. It was weird that way. She was by no means a psychic, but it never failed. She always sensed when Vittorio was nearby. She kept her gaze pinned to the staircase, and, sure enough, first a pair of red heels clicked down, followed by shapely curvy legs and a short evening dress that was molded on a voluptuous hourglass figure. Vela, Vittorio's sister. Hot on her heels was a pair of men's shoes. Callie knew those shoes. Vittorio's. Her pulse quickened. She kept her face stoic. Then she felt eyes on her. Looking around, trying to be casual, she found the source. From across the room, Natalia glared at Callie. What in the hell have I done to her? Callie was becoming irate with the blonde. Vela started the meeting, and all the hostesses and bartenders and waitstaff were quiet while she spoke. The cage dancers and trapeze performers stood near the stage, ready to get into position. Callie wished she could say she heard anything Vela said, but she didn't. Not even Natalia's glare mattered once Vittorio stepped into view. A sharp inhale of her breath punctuated the impact of seeing him again. He'd only been gone a few days, 6 days to be exact, but who was counting? She wasn't going to admit to it. No one had said where he'd gone, just that Vittorio was out of town and Vela would be running things. Vela was a great operator, a good manager, but to Callie, no one could take Vittorio's place. Vela stepped back, and Vittorio stepped out of the shadows. At least 6'2", with shoulders wider than many professional athletes, a crisp shirt covering a broad chest, nicely framed by an expensive tailored suit. She'd have drooled if she'd been alone. Anna elbowed her, and Callie kind of regretted sharing her crush with her for all the teasing she garnered on occasion. Oh, who was she kidding? She couldn't have hidden her crush on Vittorio if she'd wanted to, not from Anna. They'd known each other since they'd been in a foster home together the summer before they'd started middle school. Callie bit back a gasp. Immediately, she could tell something was different about Vittorio. Not a good kind of different either. He held himself stiffly, like he was sore or wounded. He had dark circles under his eyes, and he seemed to have lost weight. Where had he gone? Why did he seem so stressed? She couldn't discuss it with him. He was her boss, and she was just another hostess there to assure the patrons were happy. It wasn't like she and Vittorio were friends or anything, even though she felt so much more than friendly toward him. She studied his dark good looks, his sculpted cheekbones, strong jawline, and wide shoulders. He was sleek, built like an athlete or a predator. His bright blue eyes were always on alert, his body ready to spring into action. And though he seemed tired, it didn't diminish his sexy demeanor. She sighed, happy he was back. Everyone clapped. Shit! She'd missed the meeting. She'd been daydreaming about Vittorio and thinking about the tiger and hadn't heard a word he'd said. She turned to Anna. What I miss? I spaced out. She grimaced and smiled wryly. Sorry. Nothing. Anna shook her head. Where'd you go in your daydreams? Callie just shook her head and headed toward her station. Each hostess had a station, and they were fully responsible for everything that happened in there, as if it were their own place, their own business. They had discretion to comp, kick out, and pretty much do anything they wished in the name of customer service and satisfaction.
Callie?
It was Vittorio. There were butterflies in her stomach, except they weren't butterflies. They were torpedoes, and they ricocheted all through her insides. She turned. He was right behind her. Yes, She'd almost said Mr. Tiero. Vittorio. He frowned, and she wondered if it was because she'd used his first name.
I find myself in a very original situation. Never been in a situation like this.
He leaned closer, his eyes light blue chips of happiness and sexiness. He smelled so like a man. And so, shit, she couldn't think. You find yourself, oh my God. She was repeating him as if she were a trained parrot. She shut up. What the hell was he going to say? It wouldn't matter what he said. She could only concentrate on those lips, his head lowering, his breath warm and sensual, and the way his nostrils flared as if he were turned on. A heat flushed over her body. Her face was burning. Her hands were sweaty. She tried to run them over the fabric of her dress without drawing attention to herself. His lips brushed against hers. His tongue caressed her bottom lip, coaxing its way into her mouth.
Vax!
Someone calling his name penetrated the fog his kiss created.
Vax!
Callie jumped, startled. Natalia approached them. Turning, she ran toward her station, confused, embarrassed, and most of all, in a state of arousal. Her panties were soaked, her nipples pushed against the dress's fabric so hard it was painful. Or maybe they were in pain because they needed to be touched by him, fiercely needed his touch. With one last glance toward the main club, catching Vittorio's eye, she blushed and hastened around the corner. She crashed into a broad chest, an equally wide set of shoulders, dark hair, eyes that were darker than Vittorio's. A killer smile that framed a set of perfect lips. Too perfect, and too similar to the ones that had just kissed hers.
Whoa!
The walking, talking, sexy obstacle said, grabbing her by the elbows, securing her from a tumble to the floor.
Are you all right?
She gulped a swallow of chalkiness down. The man was as sexy as Vittorio, and as dangerous, it seemed.
I'm sorry, sir. The club's not open yet. I wasn't expecting anyone to be in here.
She glanced at her wrist, checking the time. Indeed, it wasn't time to be open yet. How had this man who seemed to resemble Vittorio, gotten in?
That's okay. I'm not actually, well.
The smile again. Damn that smile.
And why did he remind her so much of Vittorio?
Except his eyes were such a darker blue. Behind her, the music started cranking, definitely discouraging conversation because it was loud, and it was a sign the doors were open and guests would be arriving.
I'd better go.
She smiled back at the stranger with the flirty eyes and smile. Enjoy your evening. She turned toward her station, then looked back once more, and almost tripped when she saw the man was watching her derriere as she walked away. Flames licked at her cheeks. Chapter 7. Last call. It wasn't a slow night. The club had been packed as hell. It was raging, crazy, fun, and now it was over. Callie took off her heels and sat on a bar stool for a moment, massaging her sore feet. You'd think she'd be accustomed to it by now, but nope, her feet ached every night. High heels were a bitch when you were on your feet from 9 until 2, even if it was only 4 nights a week. Again, if it weren't for the money, she'd be history. Well, to be honest, if it weren't for the money and Vittorio. Thinking of, she hadn't seen Vittorio all night, or the stranger. A couple more moments of massaging, and she was ready to put weight back on her feet. She double-checked everything in her area, then clocked out. Time to see her favorite tiger. She slipped into the main room. It was empty. Everybody had gone, and the cleaning crew would be coming next. The door leading to Sanctuary was closed. She'd hoped she'd make it before they locked it. She almost sprinted toward it and pulled on the handle, jerking it backward. Locked. This sucks.
Miss?
One of the cleaning crew, a new guy, one she didn't recognize, young, tall, in a green uniform like the rest of the crew wore. She looked at his name tag. Antonio.
You need to go in there?
He smiled a toothy smile, eager to please. You have a key, Antonio? She didn't think the new employees had keys to this door.
Yes.
Or maybe they had keys and weren't allowed to use them? Would he get into a lot of trouble if he let her in? Only if they catch me.
Yes. Do you mind letting me in?
She put on her damsel in distress look as best she could, since she rarely played that card. Rarely. Hell. More like never. He shifted through the keys. He tried one. No luck. Fumbling, he took another one, stuck it in the slot. Again, no luck. Maybe he didn't have the right key. Antonio's face turned red. Third key, no luck. Fourth key, No luck. Damn! She was about to give up. Callie was turning away, a thank you on her lips. He put the fifth one in the slot. One click, one pull on the handle, and she was in. Thank you, she whispered to him and pulled the door closed behind her. The lighting was dim, like it always was after the club had closed. There was only indirect lighting provided by sconces, but it wasn't so dim she couldn't see. She leaned against the door. On the other side of the door, she heard Martin, the head cleaning guy, talking to Antonio.
"What are you doing by the door? We do not go in there. Not permitted. We do not open it,"
Martin said. Yipes. Would Antonio rat her out? Hopefully not, because he'd have to give himself up at the same time.
"Okay."
Antonio didn't sound worried. For real. Whew. This time. She heard a click, the lock on the door being secured once again. She was locked in. No problem. She could knock on the door later and make up some story for Martin. For the 100th time, like she always did, she wondered why the door had to be locked while the cleaners were here, and then unlocked when they left. If it wouldn't raise eyebrows and get her caught doing exactly what she was doing now, she'd ask. She waited a moment longer for her eyes to adjust to the lighting. Another pair of eyes glowed at her from beyond the bars. Predator eyes. If she didn't know it was her tiger, she'd be nervous. Sanctuary's bars didn't encompass the entire area. A moat provided a divider in some parts of the enclosure and glass in others, but she always went to the bars. That way, the tiger could come close and she could talk to him without the barrier of a wide moat or a glass wall. She approached the bars, tiptoeing. God, she wished he had a name. How she'd love to call to him to come out. She saw a silhouette, a huge one. Him. She looked again. Yes, it had to be him. No other tiger had that silhouette, or that size. She ran to the bars and almost put her hand in. The tiger ambled her way. No other tiger that had ever been at Sanctuary was as large as the one she was close to. It had to be him. She picked up her pace, walking quickly toward their usual meeting place, a boulder she could perch on while they talked. There was a boulder on the other side of the bars next to this one. It made the perfect visiting spot. It wasn't where they would talk, she corrected herself. It was where she'd talk and he'd listen. He'd listen to her talk about her classes and her stresses and just anything she wanted to talk about. As if he could stop me. She laughed inwardly. He was the only one she could share her past with. All the foster homes, everything. Except for Anna, this tiger was the only one who knew about her past. When the tiger had almost reached the boulder, she noticed. Something's different about you. She studied the large jungle cat. What is it? The cat blinked at her lazily. He wasn't even looking at her the same way he normally did. She couldn't put her finger on it. Something was different in his demeanor. He came closer, his large nose almost touching the bars. She scrutinized him. Your eyes. The color was off, very definitely off. These eyes were more of a dark color, not the blue she was used to. And now that she thought about it, his markings were different. Not anything she would have noticed if she hadn't spent so much time with the large cat, one-on-one, in close proximity, with barely a couple of feet between them, even though they were separated by bars. She backed up. You're not... A snuffing sound interrupted her, followed by a snort. A roar shook the vegetation, blasting her eardrums. The greenery in the background moved. It rustled as though something large was disturbing it. Even though she was separated from the enclosure and its inhabitants by large, thick metal bars, Callie backed up against the wall next to the door. That way, she could escape quickly. She looked at the door. The damn thing was locked. Damn. Chapter 8.
Unfucking believable.
Vax roared again and rushed through sanctuary. He leapt out of the bushes and landed with a pounce. He was right behind Rafe, still stunned his brother was here. What the hell was Rafe doing here, and why was he so close to Callie? How long had he been here? Why was he not in Europe, where he was supposed to be? Vax and Bela had just finished with the numbers, batched the credit card transactions, and locked the safe. He'd hurried down to Sanctuary to see if Callie was coming to see his tiger. The last thing he'd expected to see was his half-brother Rafe approaching Callie a few feet away from her. Close enough to swipe at her through the bars. What the hell was Callie thinking anyway? Didn't she know it wasn't Vax? He roared at Callie, driving her farther back, her eyes wide, mouth dropped open. Vax then turned toward Rafe and opened a sink with him.
"Why are you here?"
Vax didn't bother to hide his hostility. Rafe had been too close to Vax's... Shit. Was he going to think the word mate? Yeah, he guessed he was. Vax's tiger already considered Callie his mate.
"That's a fine welcome, brother."
Rafe's tone was sarcastic and detached. That only served to fuel Vax's anger. He flexed his paws, driving his claws into the boulder and undergrowth. He inhaled, expanding his wide tiger chest. His tail flicked with agitation, slapping the tree and leaves.
"You want me to welcome you, after the chaos you've thrown into my life in the past? Really?"
Vax leaned forward, ready to lunge for his brother's throat. Vax had left Europe and his family, as well as all the other things familiar to him, to come to America to avoid the favoritism and partiality his father showed to Rafe. Being shunned and in competition with his brother for the love of his father from a very young age had not been easy on Vax. The difficulty had been magnified when Rafe slept with Vax's girlfriend. No, Vax had no love for Rafe. Rafe had made sure of that when he had sex with Vax's woman. Callie gasped and backed away from the two tigers. Backed up. Hell, she did more than just back up. She ran to the wall and flattened herself against it, the cold, hard surface far from comforting. She shook like a guitar string that had popped loose. She strained in the dimness and the cover of the trees half hiding the two tigers to get a better look, hesitant to lean forward, but wondered what the hell was going on. Was the other tiger going to do her harm? Was her tiger protecting her? Surely not. She didn't want to believe that could be the case. How could it? Hers was a wild tiger as far as she knew. Her tiger bared his teeth, a deep rumble emanating from him. His chest expanded, and a snarl rose from deep in his chest. The other tiger stared at her tiger. Then both went silent, totally silent, staring at one another. They were frozen, their eyes flashing, not a single motion from their bodies, not even breathing. Did that mean they were preparing to attack each other? She didn't want her tiger hurt, though a part of her was certain he would win. Was this new tiger the reason her tiger bore those new scars? Didn't the caregivers know the other tiger was hurting her tiger? Her hands wouldn't stop shaking. She gripped her bag tighter, but the sweat made her hold on the leather straps iffy. Oh shit! It was slipping. She dropped her bag. It landed on the concrete with a thud. Both tigers snapped their heads in her direction simultaneously, two pairs of eyes, one dark blue, one lighter blue. Both pairs focusing on her with an intensity that made her even more nervous. Callie knelt to pick up her bag, moving slowly. She'd have to get out of there. The two fighting tigers would draw the kind of attention that would get her in trouble. Or would they? Maybe it would be better if she was caught in this forbidden area. The cleaning crew could distract the fighting tigers until they could be separated. As if her thoughts flew to her tiger's well-being, she decided that it might be a good idea after all, because if he were hurt... No, she didn't want to think about that. She should call for help. Yes, run for help. The two large tigers turned back toward each other. silent, deadly. Then she heard it. In the silence, a pant, a low growl, and another snorting sound. It didn't come from the direction of the two tigers. Callie held her breath and willed herself to be still. This did not bode well. She turned her head slowly, looking to see what was making the noise. Another white tiger. Oh, shit! This white tiger wasn't in the tiger enclosure. It was in the viewing area, on the same side of the bars as Callie. Her heart beat so hard she was sure it was trying to break out of its flesh and bone prison. Callie gasped and bit back a scream. She had no plan, no exit, and no safety. Great. Just great. This new tiger was a bit smaller. Female? Callie wondered, but not for long. The two big male tigers turned to look at Callie, then their large heads swiveled toward the female tiger. The female snarled at Callie, her golden brown eyes eerie against her white and black striped fur. Callie held her bag in front of her, then fought the urge to burst into hysterical laughter at the pathetic effort. As if her bag would stop a tiger attack. Chapter 9. Vax froze. He turned to stare at the white tiger on the other side of the enclosure.
Natalia. Fucking Natalia.
Rage took over where fury at Rafe's appearance had left off. Vax's fur stood on end, his muscles bunched up, flexing and tightening. The urge to attack Natalia was overwhelming. He broke off his syncing with Rafe. Needing to talk to Natalia privately, he synced up with her, a growl erupting from his chest.
Leave her alone, Natalia.
Natalia snarled out loud and within their sync. Doubly loud, the sound reverberated in Vax's mind. His senses felt Callie suck air in, her pulse racing. He narrowed his eyes at Natalia's tiger.
You will not do this.
Natalia's eyes glowed, her lips curled. This human is an interloper, and she wants what's mine. She ran her claws over the concrete walkway, a menacing sound. Callie clutched her bag tighter, her knuckles white, the tendons in her hands pronounced. Vax turned his scrutiny back on Natalia.
I am not yours.
You cannot be serious. You cannot let a human... What about the code? The Tiero Code? Even in tiger form, her voice took on the same tone she'd taken when she was a little girl, making him wonder what he'd ever found cute about her. Vax growled.
Tiero Code is Tiero business. You are not a Tiero.
Rafe took a step, then another, silently walking away toward the cave leading to the exit from Sanctuary. By design, they couldn't leave Sanctuary in tiger form. The exit was too small for a tiger. What was Rafe thinking? Was he going to shift and go out there in human form?
God!
A spike of ice drove through Vax's body at the thought of Callie seeing Rafe shift. He didn't want her to learn about him this way. Natalia took a threatening step toward Callie, growling. Her vehement eyes drilled holes into his mate. Rafe, in his human skin, stepped out from the exit, staying around the corner out of Callie's sight. He spoke to Natalia.
Go, or you'll face the wrath of two.
Rafe's voice was low, only audible to Vax and Natalia. Vax was relieved Callie couldn't see what was going on. The shifting thing would have been too much. It would send her away. This was not how he wanted to break to her that he was a shifter. He watched the scene unfold. To save Callie now would be up to Rafe, because in the time it would take Vax to shift and get out of Sanctuary and into the viewing area, Natalia could kill her. Natalia's tiger stared at Rafe unmoving. Would she listen? At this point, there was only one thing Vax could do. Actually, there were two, but shifting in front of Callie wasn't something he was willing to consider an option. If Natalia tried to harm Callie, he'd kill her. There was no doubt of that. He'd start an international war between alliances and tribes if Callie was hurt. He'd have to go with option 2. Vax crouched low, tensed, and then leapt over the moat, landing in front of Natalia. Callie screamed, a blood-curdling sound that reverberated in his heart.
Go, Natalia, now!
Vax raised his body to his full tiger height, his muscles taut, chest wide, the tendons in his neck tight. No! She broke the sync with him, essentially shutting him out. Vax stood in a triangle composed of Callie, Natalia, and him. Rafe was still behind the wall. If Natalia leapt for Callie, he'd intercept her and break her neck with a powerful bite of his jaws. Vax roared, the sound echoing off the walls. He was ready to kill her if she hurt Callie. Go, now. Again, Rafe's voice was a whisper inaudible to human ears. Natalia turned swiftly and took a long leap toward Rafe. With one backward glance at Callie, Vax followed Natalia, going through the hidden door. Staying close to the wall and out of sight, he listened for Callie to leave the enclosure. Callie was confused. How had her tiger gone over the moat? When they had hired her, they'd said the tigers couldn't get out. First the female was loose, then Callie's tiger. The tigress had turned, looked over her shoulder, then swerved, pulled a 180, and with one smooth jump, leapt out of sight. Callie hadn't known if she should make a run for the door or if she should be still. She had no idea where the tigress had gone when she disappeared around the corner. Then her tiger had followed the tigress around the corner, and Callie was alone. Stunned, she stared at the area where the tigers had been. 20 seconds later, long, grueling, forever-feeling seconds, Callie said, "Screw it," and took off for the door. She stopped in front of it, almost slamming into it in her haste, then jerked on the handle. Locked. Damn it. Hell no. She wasn't going to die in here. She pounded on the door with her fists. She'd rather be caught and fired for being in here than be eaten by that very pissed-off tigress. Sounds came from the other side of the door, then keys jingled and the latch turned. Martin opened the door.
Callie, what are you doing in here?
Let me out. Let's go. Shit, she couldn't tell him a tiger was free.
Okay.
He gave her a look like she'd lost it. Can you just close the door, please? She pulled the door from his grasp and slammed it. They're loose, she gasped. Her knees were weak. Was there really a tiger in there that was loose? This night had been far too surreal. Natalia walked to Vax, with Rafe following her. He held up his hand for them to be quiet. Vax heard Callie tell Martin there was a loose tiger. Shit. Hopefully, Martin would think she was wrong, drunk, or something. He gave Natalia a hard look, ignoring Rafe for the moment.
What are you doing?
He clenched his hand into a white-knuckled fist. She does not belong. Natalia stomped her foot.
You do not decide who or what belongs in Tiero territory. Pack your bags. You're going home. Your stay at After Dark is over.
You can't do that. You can't send me away. You need me. You need an alliance with my father. You need our tribe. It would make you the most power. Vax held up his hand.
Stop. Just go.
He looked at Rafe. They had an unresolved matter, but he didn't have time to deal with that now. He needed to get to Callie, to check on her, but he couldn't go out the door she'd just used because she'd see him coming out of Sanctuary, and she'd wonder where he'd been and why she hadn't seen him in the viewing area. No, he'd have to run through Sanctuary, then up to his suite and take the elevator down. And he'd have to do it right away. Vax shifted into his tiger form and left Natalia open-mouthed in the entryway. Bounding through Sanctuary, he took the back way up to his offices, then using the stairs in lieu of the elevator, back down, hoping that would get him to the club and Callie more quickly. He strode into After Dark. but he found no sign of Callie near the entrance to Sanctuary. Covering the entire club yielded no Callie. What the hell? Only the cleaning crew. No Callie. Even Rafe and Natalia were not around. He needed to do something about Callie and his feelings for her. This holding pattern wasn't serving him at all. His tiger roared in his head, and Vax covered his ears from the volume, even though none of it was outside of his mind.
I feel the same way,
he told his tiger. They were usually in harmony, but the tiger's frustration with the progress Vax was making toward securing their mate had become a source of agitation, and now the tiger was showing it.
It's time to claim her. It's time to put a stop to archaic, useless codes and traditions that make no sense.
Chapter 10. Martin walked Callie to the elevator.
Want me to escort you downstairs? Maybe to your car?
His frown was one of concern. She tried to force a reassuring smile to her face, hoping it didn't look like an ancient death mask. No, I'm silly. I'm sure it was my imagination. And now she was even beginning to wonder if it was the truth. She rubbed her eyes. No way a tiger would have been in the room with her, then simply turn its back. She'd been seeing things. That's it. She was simply tired, or maybe overstressed. The research paper she'd wrapped up was a biggie and had taken a lot of work and time. She stifled a yawn. How could she be yawning when her heart was still racing? Her adrenaline was in overdrive. There was no way she was tired. Maybe stress made people oxygen deprived?
Callie.
Martin stopped her with a raised hand.
Before you go.
He shook his head, regret crossing his features.
I am sorry, but I will have to tell Vittorio about you being in Sanctuary. You know I can't keep this from him. The rules.
He let his voice trail off, as if he didn't know what else to say. Callie nodded, though she wanted to beg him not to say anything. God, penalty for that was losing her job. Vittorio had already told the staff about breaking that rule. She had to try to dissuade Martin. Had to. But Martin... Anything she said would throw Antonio under the bus. She couldn't do that.
Yes?
He prompted her. Never mind. Sorry. I understand.
I know Antonio opened the door for you. He has a crush on you.
Martin shrugged.
I will have to tell that too. You have left me no alternative.
He sighed, and his shoulders sagged as though the burden was great.
He's my sister's son. He's here to study, to get his university degree.
Martin shook his head.
He needs the money. He will have to go back to Argentina.
Oh, man. Callie had felt bad already. Now she felt responsible. Hey, look, Martin. I'm sorry. Let's leave Antonio out of this, okay? God, she'd made a mess for them. Please. Martin shook his head again. I'll tell them I stole the keys. Don't do that to Antonio. It isn't right. She was grasping at straws. What else could she do? The elevator dinged. Martin nodded toward the open doors.
Go, please, and be careful.
Callie opened the door to the apartment she shared with Anna. Silence greeted her, which wasn't surprising. She looked at the time on her phone and knew exactly where her roommate was and why she wasn't home. Anna and many of the employees at After Dark often went for breakfast or to after-hours clubs. One or the other, that's where Anna was. Too bad, because Callie really wanted to talk. She needed to talk. She tried to watch TV. She tried to read a book. She tried to get the restlessness and the nervousness about the evening's events out of her mind. But she couldn't. She needed to talk, or something. She needed a distraction. She picked up her phone and texted Anna to find out where she was. Anna's returned text confirmed she was at an after-hours club in the industrial district. Then there was another text from Anna asking Callie to come out. Callie didn't need to be asked twice. In no time, she'd slipped on some jeans, released her hair from its ponytail, and fluffed it by flinging her head upside down. Not bothering with touching up her makeup, she grabbed her keys. Who cared what she looked like anyway? The only guy she liked wouldn't be there, and almost everyone there would be wasted and wearing beer goggles. 20 minutes later, Callie pulled in and parked her car in front of a warehouse in a questionable part of town. Locking her car with a jab to her remote key fob, she stopped before rounding the corner so she could take a moment to breathe deeply and compose herself. She didn't want to go in blurting to Anna about tigers. The beat coming from the warehouse filled the air outside, and the sound of laughter and loud voices carried across the parking lot. Taking quick strides toward the door, she recognized the bouncer.
"Hi, Roman."
Roman lifted his chin, acknowledging his name being called, then looked for the source. When he saw Callie, a smile filled his face, white teeth shining in the dim lighting.
"Callie, long time. Where have you been?"
"Just school. Work. You know how it goes." He nodded.
"You still at After Dark? We're hiring, you know. Always hiring."
He showed her in, waving her cover charge money away. "I'm good at After Dark." But was she? She probably would be unemployed after Martin talked to Vittorio. "You'll be the first to know if I'm job hunting." She smiled a thank you and stepped inside. The warehouse was dark, haze-filled from machines. She tried to breathe, but damn, the stuff was heavy on her lungs. The place was hopping. She could feel the bass in her bones, making her body throb. It was almost sexual, the way the music infiltrated her body, making it pulse with its rhythm. It would have been contagious, putting her in the mood to dance if she hadn't had so much on her mind. She let her eyes adjust to the lighting and haze, then began to hunt for her roommate. There she was, at a table, with Sophie and Lila. Callie saw them before they noticed her. She paused and chewed on her lip. After tonight's events, knowing she'd probably get fired, did she really want to visit with Vittorio's sisters? She'd taken a college course with Sophie, but they'd never hung out together, and Callie didn't really know Lila. Just then, as if she knew Callie was thinking of her, Sophie looked up. Her eyes pierced through Callie, and it struck her how much Sophie reminded her of a younger, gentler, feminine version of Vittorio. Anna had told her Sophie was Vittorio's half-sister, that they shared a father. Callie was inclined to believe they both must have taken after their dad. A slow but genuine smile crossed Sophie's face. Then she raised her hand, waving Callie over. She nudged Anna and pointed at Callie. Callie smiled back, a bit off guard, because she'd be such a hypocrite if she joined them and partied with them when she was sure their brother was going to fire her the next day for breaking the rules. With a heavy heart, she took a step toward their table. Lila waved at Callie, then waved the waitress over and took shots off her tray. She held one up to Callie just as she arrived at the table. Anna wrapped her arms around Callie, then pulled back, a suspicious look on her face. "What's wrong?" "Nothing." She shook her head. "Bullshit. Something's off." "Quick. Think. Quick." "There were some guys outside who made me nervous." Anna gave her the eye, but let it slide. Callie reached for a shot. Whatever the hell it was, she was going to need a lot more than this one to give her the fortitude to be with these girls tonight. She downed it, gasped, then coughed. "Damn!" She croaked the word out. Lila shoved another in front of her. "Drink up! You're behind us!" Callie had never been sure Lila really liked her, and now she was buying her shots? What was going on here? First the tiger business, now this. Another shot sounded good. She gulped it, then did the same with another. "Let's dance." Anna grabbed her arm. Sophie led the way, Lila took up the rear, and the four of them ended up on the dance floor. Within minutes, or so it seemed, Callie was comfortably numb. She was so numb and into dancing that when a man stepped in front of her, wide-chested and broad-shouldered, she'd froze and looked up slowly. The tequila was messing with her, confusing her. Suddenly she was nervous. Would Vittorio be here? She hadn't figured him for the type who would go out like this. He was so intense, so driven and goal-oriented. She pulled back, looking up into a pair of dark blue eyes and a jawline that was way too similar to Vittorio's. Ha! Ha! Her tongue froze, her mouth filled with something that felt like sawdust.
Hi.
He put his hands on her arms and held on tightly. She looked at him with a question in her eyes. He continued to hold on to her. That was when she realized she was weaving.
Remember me? Rafe. Their brother.
He waved toward Sophie and Lila.
Oh, I never introduced myself. Sorry.
His resemblance to Vittorio was way too close for comfort. Vittorio, who seemed to like her, had never made any definite indications or moves in that direction until tonight. One kiss. That was it. Then he had never come back, never stopped in to say hi or sorry or anything. Vittorio, whom she couldn't stop thinking of.
I remember you.
Her head was spinning. She'd have to stop drinking immediately.
I used to work for your...
She bit down on her lip. Shit, what the hell was she going to say?
I think I need to sit.
She wobbled her way toward their table, Rafe's hand on her elbow, the other hand on the small of her back. She could feel the heat of his hand through the thin fabric of her top. At the table, she situated herself on a stool. Feeling the intensity of Rafe's scrutiny, she avoided his gaze. He leaned close.
I'm glad you're here.
Anna approached.
Are you okay?
She asked Callie.
I'll be right back. I'll bring a round for everyone.
Rafe turned and with long strides wound his way through the crowd toward the bar. After he left them, Callie turned to Anna and whispered,
I never expected him to be here.
Why not? He's their brother.
Callie shrugged. She just hadn't counted on it. And, until just a few moments ago, he had been a random stranger she'd bumped into at after dark.
He's so different from Vittorio.
She was beginning to think of him as Vax. She wanted to chastise herself for doing that. She should stop thinking of Vittorio. He wasn't interested in her. At all. She sighed.
He's beautiful, isn't he?
Anna nudged her, clearly mistaking Callie's sigh.
Are you interested in him?
Callie was confused. Anna had a boyfriend. He was a jerk in Callie's opinion, but if Anna was happy... But Anna wasn't one to stray. Had something happened?
No, silly.
Anna raised her drink, sucking on the straw.
I have Tim. Why would I be interested in someone else? I'm just saying.
So Anna was steering her toward Rafe. Anna, who told Callie she could tell Vittorio was interested in her. Maybe Anna knew something Callie didn't. Maybe she was trying to give Callie a heads up to move on. Callie turned to watch Rafe. He was gorgeous, as sexy and handsome as Vittorio in every way. Picking between the two of them on looks alone would be difficult. There was something about Vittorio, though. But if he didn't want her, what was the point? Rafe looked up from talking to the bartender, his eyes locking with hers. He resembled a hunter in search of his prey. Was she his prey? Chapter 11. Vax returned to his apartment. He paced, giving his tiger control, making tight circles in his spacious living room. He glanced out the window, but couldn't be bothered to appreciate the view. No Callie, no resolution, nothing. He was frustrated and pissed. His tiger was even more pissed and frustrated, growls filling Vax's head until he was ready to have it out with the tiger. This was so unlike them. They were usually in lockstep. He could go to the rooftop, burn some energy, maybe a swim or lifting some weights. Then he would take to the streets and watch Callie's place. He was certain she wasn't home. He'd followed her many nights after she left from her nightly visits with her tiger at Sanctuary. She and Anna usually went to breakfast or dancing at an after-hours club after their shifts. He could wait outside, maybe talk to her, maybe... Who knew? The rooftop wasn't vacant. He felt a heartbeat, one he knew well. Then he affirmed the owner of the heartbeat from her scent.
Vela.
A smile crept over his face at his sister's presence. She was more than a sister. She was a best friend. He followed his tiger's senses and found her. She was sitting in the hot tub in her bathing suit, a file perched on a shelf in front of her, always working. He shook his head at her. That was Vela. As the alpha female, the sister of an unmated alpha male, and the oldest daughter of an alpha male, she held a position of authority. And she wore the role of alpha very well, Vax had to admit. She was extremely conscientious. She should have her own territory soon enough. She'd do a great job.
Hey.
She looked at him, up and down, noting his shorts.
Thought you'd be chilling at Sanctuary.
He gave a self-deprecating laugh.
You'd think.
What's that supposed to mean? She pulled herself up, sitting on the top step, cupping her face with her hands, elbows on her knees. He briefed her on what had happened, on Natalia's antics, on Callie's actions. Then he remembered. Shit, how could he have forgotten?
Did you know Rafe is in town?
I found out tonight. That didn't answer his question, at all.
Why is he here? He should be in Europe looking after Tiero business.
He's Rafe.
Who knows why he does what he does?
She shrugged.
This thing you two have between you, the contention, it can't last forever. It's not good for the family.
Vax bit back his temper. He was private. She had no idea about everything that had happened with him and Rafe. She probably assumed everything centered on the way their father treated him. Vax didn't tell her it wasn't simply a thing. Rafe had slept with his girlfriend. That was not a small thing. It might have been years ago, but still, a man did not sleep with his brother's woman. How should he answer her? Maybe his phone rang. He picked it up, looked at the screen, and almost threw the damn thing into the bubbling water.
Natalia.
He didn't want to talk to her. Hell no. But he did have a few choice words for her bratty ass, so he answered. On the other end of the line, a male voice, gravelly and distinct, said,
If you want the cute little white tigress, get $3 million together and wait for my call.
Chapter 12. Callie had a fierce buzz going on. The tequila was definitely doing its job, and Rafe was flirty, dangerous, and very attractive. And she was more than a little pissed off she'd gone her whole shift without the slightest visit from Vittorio, not even a quick hello. Maybe Anna had been mistaken when she said Vittorio was interested in her. Maybe now Anna realized it, and that was why she was trying to guide Callie toward Rafe. Rafe's dark blue eyes had a red-hot heat behind them. They promised a lot of intensity when... No, she wouldn't think that way. She couldn't. She shook her head to clear it. Stupid idea. Shaking her head made her dizzy. She reached out to steady herself, grabbing the tall bar table. The stupid thing tottered, and both she and it were going to fall. Rafe put an arm around her waist.
Easy there.
His voice was low and seductive in her ear. If it wasn't for Vittorio, but for some reason, she couldn't get Vittorio's Mediterranean sea blue eyes out of her mind.
I'm good,
she assured Rafe and tried to steady herself.
I bet.
He leaned in, close to her ear, his breath teasing the fine hairs near her temple.
Are you available, Or has someone already claimed a beauty like you?
A warm heat flowed to her cheeks. Vittorio's image came to her mind. His lips, light blue eyes, tan skin, and broad shoulders filled her mind and affected her body, even though she knew he'd gone with Natalia. She sighed. I wish. No claims. Not really. She'd hoped their one kiss had meant something, but maybe it was Vittorio's way of testing to see if there was chemistry. Maybe he hadn't felt any and had let it go at that. Sadness washed over her. As intensely as she'd felt their kiss, she couldn't believe he'd felt nothing. Anna elbowed her, giving her a dirty look. Callie elbowed Anna back. It wasn't fair. It wasn't like Vittorio was really interested in her. It was probably all in Anna's mind.
But you have someone you're interested in?
Rafe continued, drawing closer, his body almost touching hers. I thought I did. She took another shot off the table and downed it, swallowing the burn, the bitterness of the alcohol, and, with it, swallowing Vittorio's rejection.
Let me guess.
He tapped his chin, a very strong jawline attached to the chin, with very full lips countering the powerful jawline.
My brother?
Callie gasped, then bit back a reply. How pathetically obvious she must be. Doesn't matter. Vittorio hadn't made another move. If anything, he had avoided her.
He is practically engaged to Natalia.
Rafe shrugged. Everything began to spin for Callie when Rafe said that. She gripped the table to keep from wobbling. Then the guard she'd always had slipped into place, the same guard that all those years had helped her cope with her life. Oh well, what's new? She'd been rejected all her life, shuffled from foster home to foster home on her own at 17. This should barely surprise her. No, Sophie said.
That's what Natalia said.
Rafe countered. Not exactly. Lila popped off. The not exactly thing wasn't exactly comforting or encouraging to Callie. She reached for another shot. Doesn't matter, she muttered. I'll probably be fired tomorrow.
I doubt that.
Rafe took the shot away from her.
I don't think you really need this one. Why would you be fired anyway?
It didn't matter anyway if she was going to be fired. It sounded like Vittorio had moved on. Screw it. She forced a smile. Let's dance. Hours later, sweaty and drunk off her ass, she was still thinking of Vax, even though Rafe had been attentive and sweet the entire time they'd been at the club. Time. She had no idea how much time had passed. Before she knew it, the place was closing and the glaring overhead lights were on. She was blinded, and Rafe seemed to find it amusing she was blinking and still couldn't get anything to come into focus. Anna, Sophie, and Lila were laughing and talking about breakfast. Callie's head spun. Food didn't even sound good. Nothing sounded good. If it weren't for the tequila buzz, she wouldn't be numb. She'd feel. And what she'd feel was, well, she didn't want to feel what she would feel. She knew how she'd feel. It all centered around Vittorio. And she needed to get her mind off him. Talk about your hopeless causes. I'm going home. She reached in her purse to pull out her phone and call for a cab. Not alone. Not like that, Anna said, taking her purse. Hey, I was just going to call a cab. Rafe took the purse from Anna's hands.
I'll get her home, make sure she's safe, and then I'll meet you 3 for breakfast. My sisters and I have some catching up to do.
A cab ride later, most of which Callie spent drifting in and out of catnaps, they arrived in front of her apartment complex. Rafe held her up while they managed the stairs to her second-floor apartment. He unlocked the door and helped her inside. Callie made it 3 paces, then collapsed on the couch. Everything is spinning. Rafe sat on the edge of the couch, watching her. Why was he looking at her like that? What? She barely managed to slur it out, couldn't even remember what the hell she was going to say. She closed her eyes, but everything was spinning. Callie grabbed her head and jerked herself to a sitting position, her eyes flying open. Rafe's intensely blue eyes were unreadable. His face was enigmatic. He was probably a heartbreaker wherever he was from. Too bad she still cared for his brother. Ugh. His brother, who was out of town, with Natalia. Why? She swallowed hard. Why are you looking at me like that?
Just making sure you crash out and don't stop puking.
You have no idea the shit I've seen tonight, she said and closed her eyes. Chapter 13. Vax ran his hands over his face. He'd joined Vela in the hot tub. So much for going after Callie. So much for talking to her. So much for asking her out. He heaved an exasperated sigh. Damn Natalia. She managed to screw things up even when she wasn't around.
I don't have a choice.
He really didn't. He'd have to go after Natalia.
It's not your job to save Natalia. Call her father.
Vela slapped the water, splashing both of them. He reached for a small towel and tossed it her way.
Think about it. If we can't protect someone in our own territory, imagine the implications. Rival tribes will try to jump us.
She blotted her face with the towel.
And we'll kick their asses for trying.
He held up his hand, shaking his head.
I'm not done. There's more. This could jeopardize our alliance with her father's tribe. It won't matter, she's a headstrong, impetuous brat.
That would have killed Callie.
At least Callie's safe now. It's not like Natalia can hurt her while she's being held captive.
He paused, thinking about his options.
There's no other way. I have to retrieve her, then drop her back in her father's lap once and for all.
Vela grimaced.
You could get killed looking for her and never find her. Or, say you don't get killed and then you do find her. What if you can't save her? What if you save her? Assuming you can save her, and you're not killed in the process, and she's not already dead when you find her. Say all those things fall into place.
Vela had a disbelieving look on her face and in her tone.
Then what?
She fired her questions off in a barrage of clipped sentences. Christ, that was a hard set of statements to keep up with. He looked at the glass on the side of the hot tub.
That thing isn't helping you make any sense. I told you I'll deliver her ass to her father with an answer. The answer is no to the offer she and I be married.
And then he could finally ask Callie out. Vela shrugged and rolled her eyes.
I see I can't talk you out of it. So what do you want me to do?
He was clearly resigned to his decision.
And what do I tell the others?
He knew she didn't mean Sophie and Lila. There were the shifters who worked security and the shifters who worked in a few of the business offices in Tiero Towers, too. She balled up the towel and threw it back at him.
And what about Rafe?
Rafe.
Yeah, he'd had to deal with him, too.
Run after dark. Get the 3 million together. Tell everyone. Tell them I'm out of town.
He paused. They'd wonder where Natalia was. And if word got to her father she was missing, then... Shit.
Tell them I'm out of town with Natalia.
His stomach soured.
That way they won't wonder where she is.
He got out of the tub and wrapped a large towel around his waist. He was still sore and still had a few internal wounds that needed to heal. I'll raise the cash for the ransom. And Rafe? It was his turn to sigh.
Offer our brother the hospitality a family member is due.
Now his stomach flipped upside down, but he couldn't do anything else about Rafe. He wasn't going to put Vela in the middle of his issues with his brother. Vax would take care of him as soon as he returned. Chapter 14. Callie woke up disgruntled, hungover, and confused. She was in her bed. That wasn't where she'd fallen asleep, though. Oh, God. She was naked under the sheet. Had she had sex? Wouldn't she remember if she had? Would she? She'd been pretty drunk. She threw a t-shirt and shorts on, ran out of her room and straight to the only room that had sounds coming from it. Shit. Please don't let it be Rafe in the kitchen. And if it is Rafe, please let him be dressed. Wait a minute. She knew herself. She'd never do that. Not with Rafe. Not when she felt the way she did about Vittorio. No, never. Then she remembered, though she still was in a haze, someone had mentioned Vittorio was engaged to Natalia. Callie peeked in the kitchen. It was Anna unloading the dishwasher. Thank goodness it wasn't Rafe. Each dish Anna took out and placed in the cupboard sounded like she was tossing grenades. Callie held her head, the sound of the dishes sheer torture. Anna looked up from her task. Hey! She did a double take. Damn, you look harsh. I'm making breakfast. Want some? Callie rubbed her temples. How long have you been here? Here? You mean like when did I get home? Anna took a frying pan out. Pancakes or fried eggs? Callie's tummy flipped, and not in a good way. She wondered if she was turning all kinds of shades of green. She took a deep breath to keep the contents of her stomach from coming up in a violent upheaval. Did she even have any stomach contents left? I guess what I'm saying is, did anyone leave? Leave? Anna cocked her head, then realization crossed over her face. Oh no, you didn't! She screeched. Callie put both hands over her ears. For the love of chocolate, please keep the decibel level down. Sorry. Anna smiled apologetically and took the eggs out of the refrigerator. But did you? Are you trading one brother for another? The thought made Callie grab her stomach. Or was it the tequila's after effects? Don't be silly. Anyway, it sounds like Vittorio has plans with Natalia. Why don't you just call him Vax? That's what his family and friends call him. Callie was starting to think of him that way, but she shouldn't. I'm his employee. For now, probably soon to be ex-employee. That doesn't give me the right to do that. Anna's mischievous look transformed into a sly smile. Did you do Rafe? He's hotter than Vax. No, and no, he's not. Callie stomped out of the kitchen, went to her room, closed the blinds all the way, and slipped between the cool sheets. Had Rafe taken her clothes off? Had she done anything with him? Jesus, she didn't need these complications. It was 7 in the evening when Callie woke up again. She stretched, loathing the idea of getting out of bed. Sure, she'd woken up in time for work. The problem was her mind and body weren't in agreement as to whether she should be at work or not. Every few moments, she prayed to the porcelain goddess. She had never drunk the way she had last night. Why? Why had she done that? She knew the answer. Simple, really. Vittorio. Vax. Whatever. She wasn't sure she could handle the loud music tonight. But what the hell choice did she have? She got up and showered, did her face, and headed in, regretting every moment because she walked in with a hangover. Her day sucked already. Pounding head, cotton mouth, stomach protesting. Anna gave her one look and shook her head. You shouldn't be here. Callie looked toward the stairs. She didn't want Vax to see her this way. He's not here, Anna said. He's not? She didn't have the right to ask or wonder, but still. Where? What? Then shit got worse. A lot worse, real fast. He's out of town with Natalia, Anna said. I'm sorry. Her voice was low. Callie leaned against the wall. It felt like someone was using a rotor-rooter on her tummy relentlessly. She hiccuped once. Then, without warning, the contents of her stomach projectile vomited out onto the counter in the mirror of the employee dressing room. She clapped her hands over her mouth, but it was way too late.
Oh, God.
Anna reached for a paper towel and wet it under the faucet.
Let me take you home.
No, I need to work. Callie reached for support, holding onto the counter with a white-knuckled grip.
You can't. You're a mess. It's okay. We'll cover for you.
Anna led her out of the room, holding her hand, pressing a wet, cool paper towel to her forehead. And Callie ran right into a solid man wall. She fell back against Anna.
Rafe.
Hi.
Rafe took a look at Callie, his expression one of concern.
You don't look so hot.
Callie grimaced. Thanks. Not. It wasn't nice hearing she looked like shit from the brother of the man she was still in love with.
I'm sending her home,
Anna told Rafe. He put his hand on Callie's elbow and his other arm around her waist.
Let me take her.
Oh, hell to the no.
Chapter 15. Before Vax left Tiero Tower 1, he stopped by the quarters housing Tiero's security, a group of shifters loyal to the Tiero family. They doubled as bouncers for after hours, but their main task was security. Not the oppressive or prohibitive type of security. They just kept an eye on the perimeter and made sure matters were amiable and drama was kept away from Tiero territory and the Tiero Towers. Before Vax could reach for the door leading to the main suite of the bouncers, it opened wide. Gavin, one of his two top guys, was waiting for him, having sensed his approach. Vax looked at the men comfortably splayed out on the sectional in the oversized chairs. To the unobservant and unknowing, they looked like relaxed, chilling guys, but a closer look revealed their inner predators were ready for action. Always.
Gavin, got a moment?
Sure. Gavin turned toward the private meeting room. Vax wasn't a small man by anyone's standards, far from it, but Gavin was a giant of a shifter. His father and Vax's had been close friends growing up, and Vax and Gavin were equally close. They'd been raised together, growing up on the streets of Rome and Athens during the summertime, and sent to boarding schools in England during the winter. Gavin was far, far more than just security. Gavin closed the door behind him.
What's going on? Need you to keep this quiet. Natalia's missing. I got a phone call. Someone claiming to have her. Asking for $3 million in ransom.
Gavin's eyes closed slightly. His lids only partially hid his suspicion. He shook his head.
Not from here, she wasn't.
Gavin wasn't one for many words, never had been. His tiger did the talking for him, and if someone was on the wrong side of Gavin, they were on the wrong side of his tiger. The very wrong side. Vax had seen that in person, and the other side never fared well. He trusted Gavin. If Gavin said Natalia hadn't been taken from the towers, she hadn't been. Then that meant she'd left and... That was the problem. He didn't know what came after the "and" part.
I didn't think anyone would have gotten past you. I'm sure you'd have told me if anything had happened.
I'll get right on it, Gavin announced. Vax shook his head.
No, I'll take care of this.
I'm not comfortable with the head of the North American Tiero being out there looking for information.
No one must know. I'll go. If anyone asks about me or her...
Vax tapped his fingers on his thigh impatiently.
Refer them to Vela.
Gavin made a fist, clearly unhappy with not having a role in assisting, then nodded. The best leaders knew when to be followers.
She's running things?
Vax nodded, chewing on the inside of his lip, ready to get on the road and sort this crap out.
I'll make sure she's okay,
Gavin assured him. Vax knew he would. Gavin would be perfect backup for Vela. That wasn't something that concerned him. Plus, he'd never had any doubt about Vela's abilities. She'd run things better than he did.
What about Lila?
Gavin asked, and Vax was surprised it had taken him so long to bring it up. Gavin was still in love with Lila, though their relationship was long over.
She's staying,
Vax said, feeling for his friend, knowing what it was like to love someone and not have her. But some things just weren't meant to be. He thought of one more thing he was hesitant to ask.
Maybe having someone keep an eye on.
Gavin cocked his head, waiting for Vax to finish his sentence. Shit, he couldn't. He was going to ask Gavin to have someone keep an eye on Callie, but he wasn't ready to let that out, not even to Gavin. Not that he didn't trust Gavin to keep a secret. Vax didn't want to put him in a position where he'd have to lie for Vax if it came out Vax wanted a human. It wouldn't be fair to ask Gavin to keep that secret from the elders.
Never mind, I got it.
Vax opened the door.
I'll keep you posted. Call me if you hear or see anything.
Gavin gave him a solid clip nod. Chapter 16. Callie leaned against the elevator's back wall, deliberately staying away from Rafe. It wasn't that he tempted her, though God knew the man would tempt any breathing woman, except for the one who was in love with Vax. She didn't want to lead him on. When they reached the bottom floor, she took a few steps. She thought she'd be okay until she stumbled out of the elevator. Quicker than she could react, Rafe grabbed her arm and was in front of her, and she fell into his chest and solid abdomen. It wasn't lost on her how muscular the man was, just like his brother. It also wasn't lost on her that his brother was out of town with another woman. She couldn't stop thinking about him. This was becoming ridiculous. She looked up at Rafe. Why couldn't she just start caring for him? He opened the door and helped Callie into the car. He drove carefully, considerate of her condition, but no matter how carefully anyone would have driven, it didn't help Callie's tummy or her head as she leaned back against the headrest. Each turn made her head spin and her stomach flip. This was the most epic hangover ever. Who am I kidding? This isn't about tequila alone. A huge portion of what ailed her was the devastation over Vax being out of town with Natalia. That sealed the deal, didn't it?
Hungry?
Rafe asked. I think so, but I'm not sure. Everything's still spinning. I've never... Her stomach heaved. She paused and swallowed hard to keep whatever was trying to rise from coming up. I've never been this sick. Or this heartbroken. Rafe pulled up in front of her apartment.
After I get you situated, I'm making a food run.
You're way too nice. Was he feeling guilty about Vax and Natalia? Was he trying to make it up to her? She'd never even heard of him before this. Oh, God. Had Rafe been brought in to make her feel better? Oh, shit. Now she sounded like a damned conspiracy theorist. Her stomach flipped again, but she wasn't sure if it was hunger or the hangover or her freaking ideas. Damn. He helped her upstairs, and she grabbed her spot on the couch. She'd become way too familiar with this couch of late.
I'll be right back.
Callie had no idea how long Rafe was gone because she fell asleep. She didn't even know how he got back in. She should have been worried, and if it weren't for the fact she trusted the Tiero family and the deep blue sincerity in Rafe's eyes, she would have been. He returned, arms laden with oversized bags from the nearest deli.
Soups, salads, and sandwiches.
He closed the front door behind him. Who are you feeding? There seemed to be enough food for an army. He reached into the bag and pulled out a bouquet of roses. Large, beautiful, deep red blooms with vivid green leaves. Callie gasped. Those weren't available at the local deli, that much she knew. I think I've misled you. His jaw clenched, and Callie saw a sign of the man she'd first run into at after dark, not the brother of Lila and Sophie, but the sexy stranger she'd encountered who was capable of seducing a woman with his eyes.
No, but I want to get to know you better.
What the hell was she supposed to say? I'm still in love with your brother. The most you can expect from me is friendship. She hoped that would cover it.
I'll take that for now.
He took out the styrofoam containers.
Creamy tomato basil.
He removed the lid from the soup, then stopped and locked eyes with her.
Do you not feel any chemistry at all?
Callie couldn't look away. She found him beautiful, but he wasn't Vax. Then she reminded herself Vax was out of town with Natalia. It occurred to her she wouldn't be able to work at the club after Vax came back, not with him and Natalia there together. It would be too painful. She'd figure the situation out later because, again, her head was beginning to throb. "I need to lie down," she said. "I'll eat something in a bit." Thinking of Vax reminded her she was going to get fired soon anyway. She wouldn't have to see him and Natalia together because Vax would be so disappointed in her for breaking the rules, he'd fire her immediately. As she pulled the light blanket over her legs, she realized she'd never answered Rafe's question about whether or not she felt any chemistry between them. She closed her eyes. She didn't need to deal with emotions right now. They would have to wait. A sound caught her attention, bringing her out of sleep. Movement. Rafe was the only one in the apartment, wasn't he? She opened one eye to a slit. Rafe stood at the entrance to the living room watching her. He approached and sat on a nearby recliner, still studying her. This was as good a time to ask him about last night. "Last night? What exactly happened?"
You don't remember?
He put his hand over his heart.
I'm crushed, devastated.
She was mortified all over again. She chewed on her lip, worked the blanket between her fingers. She still couldn't believe she'd been naked. Did that mean they'd done anything? She barely knew him. Not that she'd never had a wild night. She had, but that had been when she was younger, and it sure as hell hadn't been with a brother of the man she was in love with. A smile teased at his lips, threatening to emerge. She cocked her head at his odd reaction. Rafe laughed at the expression on her face.
I'm just kidding. Nothing happened. Why?
She captured the sigh of relief threatening to come out. Chapter 17. For 24 hours, Vax scoured the city on the down low, not drawing any attention to himself or the missing Natalia. At night, he allowed his tiger to take over, jumping across alleys, rooftops to rooftops, trying to find Natalia's scent. He had no luck. None. Zero. It was as if she'd vanished completely without a sign. How the hell could that be? He called Vela, updated her. After she'd listened to him, she fell silent. Something was going on with her. There was a weird vibe, even through the cell phone.
What's up, Vela?
Rafe. He's still here. I'm being hospitable. He could still feel her trepidation, and it made his sensors go off. What the hell was going on?
But?
She let out a breath in a loud whoosh.
He seems to have developed a crush on Callie.
He gritted his teeth. That sour thing in his stomach was becoming too frequent.
What's new? That's Rafe.
He used the same word she had. How ironic, how applicable, how frustrating, because right now, the only thing Vax's tiger wanted to do was go back and rip through Rafe's vital organs.
I don't know, Vax. I think it's different this time. Like he's falling for her. Bullshit. He barely knows her. What else is going on?
He faked blowing it off, knowing she wasn't fooled, knowing Vela knew this was bothering him.
Nothing.
Rat-a-tat. Her nails tapped on whatever surface she was nearby.
Oh, Martin wants to talk to you.
Odd. The trusted head of his cleaning crew had always been under the radar.
What about? Won't say.
Vax could imagine Vela shrug.
Then it'll keep. I'm almost ready to quit. Damned kidnapper hasn't called me. Has he called there? Do you have the cash raised?
Got it.
And while I was doing that, I got a few looks from one of the bankers, some raised brows from another, and a couple of questions from some of our associates. Luckily, no questions came from the feds. And no, the kidnapper hasn't called. Thanks, sis. I'll be in touch.
There was one more guy he could talk to. He hadn't wanted to. Looked like it was time for a trip to New Orleans. New Orleans, home of the Arsenault tribe. His alliance with the New Orleans Arsenault was non-existent. Neither side had made any effort to join forces or become associates. Vax had a passing awareness they existed, nothing more. He'd never heard of them while he was living in Europe, and when he came to Dallas, he'd heard they were to be avoided. His father had said,
"Avoid, and do not trust the Arsenault."
So Vax did, and though he'd once made inquiries about them because he was curious, he'd never met any of them. Talk about stepping into the lion's den. The Arsenault weren't the only tiger shifters. Their tribe was the most multi-specied on the continent. Lion shifters, wolf shifters, panther shifters, leopard shifters, you name it. And the Arsenault were the most fun, rumor had it. Maybe it was time to create an alliance, or, at the very least, an association. Chapter 18. Callie spent close to the next 24 hours drifting between the bed and the couch, hovering in a state of depression. She wasn't scheduled to work the next 3 days, so she didn't worry about showering or dressing or anything. She couldn't get Vax out of her mind. Every time she thought of him, a vision of Natalia joined in, bringing tension and an overwhelming need to cry. Vax was pretty much soon to be out of her life, and now she realized her tiger would be too, of course. She wouldn't be able to visit him like she had. When Callie wasn't moping, she watched old romance movies on TV and cringed at every happy ending. The next night, she woke up to the smell of something delicious. Her stomach rumbled in agreement. She sat up, looked around, rubbing her eyes. Noise in the kitchen alerted her she wasn't alone, though the aroma of the food had already made that pretty clear. She figured Anna had prepared an awesome meal and had left it cooking. "Anna?" She called out for her roommate. A head peeked around the corner. "Rafe."
"Hey, sleepyhead."
She stared at him. "What time is it?"
"Midnight."
Why was he here, and how had he gotten in? What? How?
"Anna gave me your keys when I told her I wanted to bring you some food."
Was the man psychic? How had he known she was going to ask? He continued.
"It's not exactly good for you to lie in bed watching movies and doing nothing else."
Anna had been telling on her. "What else has my roommate shared with you?" "I'm going to kill her." She got up, eager to follow the wonderful aroma. Her stomach was finally settling back to normal again. Too bad she couldn't say the same about her heart. "God, my body's all screwed up, waking up at midnight." He put an arm across the doorway, holding the jamb, blocking her entrance.
"Not really. You're only a couple hours off. You'd be at work right now if you were working tonight."
"Where is the traitor? I mean Anna. And what gives? Why can't I go into the kitchen?"
"It's a surprise, so stay out."
He softened the remark with a smile.
"She's at after dark, working. She came in while you were crashed out. I guess you slept through it. How about a shower? You'll feel better."
"Probably smell better, too."
"I can take a hint," she laughed. "You know I didn't mean it that way."
The look he gave her let her know he still had feelings. She forced the sigh away, turning to go. She could see his eyes following her in the reflection in the hallway mirror. Callie took a shower, letting the hot water soothe her. She was messed up mentally, completely screwed up over Vax. How had she let him get to her this way? She scrubbed her scalp with an intensity driven toward hurting her and reminding her she was alive. Flushed, her skin pink from the vigorous towel dry, she dressed in a tank and yoga pants. She was proud of her curves and saw no reason to hide them with baggy clothes. She looked in the mirror. Every now and then, she wondered if she should go on a diet. Hell no. She loved chocolate too much. When Callie opened her bedroom door, the first thing she noticed was the lights were off in the living room. The second thing she saw was the flickering. Candles. The living room was lit with candles. She knew the power hadn't gone out since she still had light on in her room. Making her way to the living area with trepidation, she noted the table was set. There were candles in the center. Way too romantic for a man she wasn't having a romance with. She braced herself. She needed to have the talk with Rafe. There was no option but to friend-zone him in a firm way. And what did that remind her of? It only served to remind her of what she wished for with Vax. Chapter 19. Vax drove straight through to New Orleans. He knew where to go. An alpha shifter's home wasn't an easy secret to keep in the shifter world. A hideaway, sure, that could be kept secret, but not his main home. That was where he conducted some of his business. The same way everyone knew they'd find Vax at after dark, all shifters knew they'd find the Arsenault Alpha at Arsenault Point, the plantation they lived in on the outskirts of New Orleans. Vax arrived at Arsenault Point shortly after lunchtime. Trees laden with Spanish moss lined up like sentinels on each side of the driveway Vax pulled into. He shut the car door behind him and studied the large plantation home. He wasn't one who knew much about New Orleans or Louisiana history, but he'd be willing to bet this was one of the oldest homes in the state.
"Here goes nothing,"
the cynic in him said, though he hoped the visit would prove fruitful. Word had it the Arsenault were procurers of information. He'd also heard some of Arsenault early money had come from extortion. He looked at the large staircase leading to a sturdy set of doors made of thick wood and wondered if they weren't encased in metal. Shifters were big on security, though they didn't fear much from humans one-on-one. The door swung open, inward. Half a dozen men stepped out, large men. He counted 2 lion shifters, a panther shifter, an orange tiger shifter, and 2 mountain lion shifters. It seemed the rumors about the Arsenault tribe were accurate. They did have multiple species of shifters. Just when he thought they'd brought out all they were going to, 3 bear shifters joined the large feline shifters. None of them smiled. They didn't threaten him, but he could feel their senses working overtime to determine his purpose. He kept his pulse even, didn't indicate fear or any other emotion.
"Keep it neutral."
He was in a shitload of trouble, though, judging from their numbers. A 7th shifter walked out the door. A white tiger, large, male. Vax studied them, no expression on his face.
"I'm looking for Lazare Arsenault. You found him,"
the tall white tiger shifter said.
"Hello, cousin." "Cousin?"
What did he mean by that?
"Your mother and my father were second cousins. Second or third, I'd have to check."
Vax took a second to size up the white tiger.
"I haven't heard that." "I wonder why."
Then he thought of his father's warnings to stay away from the Arsenault.
"Maybe the Arsenault are too controversial, too black sheep for the Tiero. Your mother was the only connection to our family, really, the only one who kept contact such as it was, but it couldn't have been easy for her. She'd have been shunned. Some of our practices are looked down upon by other shifters."
Lazare gave a continental old-world shrug.
"After your mother passed, my condolences, incidentally."
Vax nodded acceptance of Lazare's condolences.
"And your father was from where?" "Here. His great-grandfather brought his family here, and some of them not by choice."
He waved the other shifters back, and they departed through the open doors, leaving Vax and Lazare alone. That was something else Vax had never heard about.
"Slavery?" "Of course."
Lazare smiled, a self-deprecating expression on the man's face.
"Can't tell by looking at me, though, can you?"
Dark hair, check. Short and straight. Darkish eyes, check. Fair skin.
"No, It isn't immediately apparent you have ancestors who were slaves brought in from Africa.
Vax looked at his own skin. He was darker than Lazar.
It was many generations ago.
Lazar gave a sideways nod, very European, as if that was past history and not worth the time or effort to worry about now.
What brings you here, Vittorio Alessandro Tiero? Surely not a lesson in family history. You didn't even know I existed. Surely not an alliance, because you'd have sought it sooner. Do tell, mon ami.
So Lazar, an Arsenal white tiger, knew Vax's middle name. He wondered if it was merely a ploy Lazar used to show he had information, or if it was something else. A woman came out of the house, strikingly beautiful, curvy, auburn-haired. Vax spared her a glance, then another, taking stock, trying to determine if she were friend or foe.
My sister.
Lazar waved the woman forward.
Meet our cousin, Vittorio. Vax.
Vax nodded to the woman, a smile coming to his lips.
Alexandrine.
Lazar said. Alexa. His sister corrected Lazar. Lazar looked from one to the other.
No coincidence, considering our ancestry.
What the hell is he talking about? Lazar seemed to speak in half sentences. There he goes again, Alexa said. The history buff. Don't get him started. Started on what? Vax wouldn't mind Lazar starting, just so long as he'd finish.
You doubt me? Or is it that history bores you?
Lazar quirked a brow at his sister. She nodded, her dark red hair glinting in the light. Maybe I'm not bored. Maybe you amuse me. Oh, hell. Vax had come here for assistance, and now he found himself hoping he would not have to end a squabble between sibling shifters. Curiosity won. Vax asked,
Want to clue me in? Your names, Alessandro and Alexandrine. Both of you have Alexander in the base of your name.
Lazar smiled, as though he was enjoying this. Then he continued speaking.
Our roots are Macedonia. Our family name is based on Alexander.
Still confused, Vax glanced at Alexa, hoping for an answer. She was rolling her eyes. Lazar, enough. She crossed her arms over her chest. Lazar nodded.
Enough it is.
He smiled an indulgent smile at his sister.
Back to the present. You're here because...
He waved his hand with the flourish of a magician, prompting Vax to respond. Vax found himself liking this character. He would enjoy his company if he weren't here under such dire circumstances. Now the circumstances were even direr, knowing Rafe had designs on Callie.
Help. What kind of help can the Arsenal offer the Tiero? A kidnapped girl.
Vax gave them the short version, shortish, only leaving out he wasn't interested in her.
Maybe I can help.
Lazar dug a cell phone out of his pocket, studied the screen, and tapped on it with his fingertip.
Alexa, would you please make our cousin welcome while I make some inquiries?
Anything to get out of the history lesson, Alexa laughed. Come with me, she said to Vax. If anyone can help, my big brother can. Chapter 20. Rafe was around for most of the rest of Callie's time off. She could tell he had feelings, though. How the hell could he after such a short time? She enjoyed his company, but more like she would that of a cousin or a brother. She had no chemistry with Rafe. He didn't make her pulse race or her girly parts respond the way Vax did. Stop that, she reminded herself. Vax has Natalia, and he's gone. Not an option. Anna was just heading out the door to go to work when Callie asked again, Is he back? Vax? Anna gave her a look, almost of pity. No, the tiger. No, I asked Sophie and Lila, and they said Vela would know. I'll ask her tonight. Thanks. Callie hoped her tiger would be back when she went to work tomorrow night. She wanted to talk to him. God, she needed to vent about how pathetic she was for still being in love with a man who was on vacation with another woman. Anna was just closing the door behind her when Callie heard Rafe's voice.
"I'm taking her out for a ride. She's been cooped up enough,"
Rafe said. "Good idea." Rafe stepped into the doorway. Every time she saw him, she found herself shaking inside. So much did he resemble Vax in build and coloring, all except for the eyes. Rafe's were an intense dark blue, whereas Vax's were a glorious Mediterranean open blue.
"I want to see parts of Dallas. No, better yet, I want to see Fredericksburg. I keep hearing about this hill country you have in Texas, where some of our family members enjoy roaming."
That's an interesting way to put it. Callie gave him a weird look.
"I meant driving. You know, roaming the roads."
It's dark outside. Not much to see in the hill country right now. Plus, it's not exactly a day trip. Save it for another time.
"There may not be another time after my brother returns."
Why's that? Callie didn't understand what he meant.
"Doesn't matter. So I guess we can just check out Dallas then."
Sure. At least going with Rafe would keep her from moping at home all night long. Callie really was beginning to like Rafe. Like. As in, nothing more than that. He was a dangerously sexy man, but she was immune to him. Her feelings for Vax dominated her heart and mind, though Rafe made for a good friend during dark times. "What's Europe like? Where do you live?" He pulled into a park, though the sign clearly stated it was closed. Rafe got out and opened her car door.
"Let's walk."
Callie looked at the closed sign, then looked back at Rafe. Why not? He helped her over the fence. As soon as they'd reached cover in the trees and they were no longer visible from the park benches, he answered her.
"It's very different from here. The lifestyle's more laid back. The people enjoy living more. I'm in the mountains of northern Greece, sometimes in southern Italy. Our father is Italian. Guess you knew that?"
She didn't. She was in love with Vax, a man she knew virtually nothing about. Nothing except that when he was around, blood rushed through her body and sounded like she was whitewater rafting. Her senses were so overwhelmed, nothing else mattered when he was around. Which was exactly why she'd have to quit as soon as he and Natalia returned.
"Want to know a secret?"
Rafe's eyes were almost black in the dark forested night. She studied his face, wishing she could read his expression in the dimness. "If I say yes, do I have to share?"
"No."
"Okay, then. Yes." He leaned against a tree, his shoulders wider than the large tree's girth. Callie sat on a low horizontal branch running parallel to the ground.
"Vax and I were never really close. Ever. I think when I was a little kid we had a chance. That vanished not long after I started school."
He shook his head as if disappointed.
"When I was much younger, a girl, a former girlfriend of Vax's, made a pass at me. I didn't know she'd been his girlfriend. I slept with her. Then I found out the ugly truth. She was still his girlfriend. She was just trying to make him jealous. That was the nail that sealed the coffin on our being close. Ever, I guess."
A twinge of jealousy struck Callie, even though it was a girl who was clearly long gone from Vax's life. Rafe's secret explained the interaction she'd seen between Rafe and Vax that one night. So if that was the nail that sealed the coffin shut, what happened before that? Another head shake. This time, it almost seemed anger-driven.
"Our father. He's super competitive. He pushed Vax into positions where he always had to prove himself, and sometimes against him, his own father. Then he made him compete with me when I was older."
Doesn't sound like a very good father. What did Vax do?
"He left. I was young, stupid, pretty much bought into all the hype. It was nice being favored. I'm sure I enjoyed it full tilt and took complete advantage of it.
Rafe should clear the air with his brother. It seemed he regretted the rift between them. Surely they should be able to get past some of this, or at least work through it. Have you discussed it with Vax? He shook his head, his eyes glittering in the darkness.
I haven't.
You should. I've never had a family. He'd never known the emptiness of not having a family, but it was a feeling she knew well. She'd give anything to have an assortment of siblings, even half-siblings. She thought of the closeness she shared with her tiger. I'll share a secret with you.
I told you that you don't have to. I thought you didn't want to.
He cocked his head and crossed his arms over his chest. There's this tiger at Sanctuary. I'll probably lose my job, but he's like my best friend. No, he's more than that. It's like he gets me better than any person has. Chapter 21. Vax, Alexa, and Lazar were at the side veranda at Arsenault Point. The afternoon sun transformed the estate's landscape into a wonderland of topiaries, hedges, and flower arrangements. Magnolias with large white blooms garnished the spacious yard. Vax had been here for a few days. He would have enjoyed the Arsenault hospitality under normal circumstances if he weren't in a hurry to get home. If he weren't in a hurry to see Callie. And, if he was honest with himself, if he weren't disconcerted about Race's presence at after dark, and around Callie especially. Not that Vax wasn't enjoying Lazar's history lessons while they waited for word on Natalia. Some of the lessons included Lazar's explanation of how they were descendants of Alexander the Great. He showed off the old pictures and portraits, including one of his mother as a teenager.
So, what kind of shifter was Alexander? You have to ask. A white tiger, naturally, but the mystery is that he wasn't born a shifter. It happened sometime while he was in India. You do know they say he died when he was in his 30s, poisoned. That was propaganda he spread.
Behind Lazar's back, Alexa shook her head. Lazar excused himself to take a phone call. Vax took the opportunity to ask Alexa a question.
You don't believe the stuff Lazar says? About Alexander?
It's not so much that as it is I don't think it matters. We are who we are, and we're in the here and now. He admired the sprawling live oak trees decked in Spanish moss.
You like Louisiana?
Alexa frowned. It's okay. I'd like to visit Dallas again, stay longer. I'd like to see the world more. Lazar is a bit overprotective.
Maybe the same could be said of me.
He wondered if his sisters thought the same way. He'd have to ask Vela.
Our place is open to you whenever you wish. I know my sisters would love to learn they have another cousin.
I may just take you up on that. By the way, I'm not the only sister Lazar has, just the only one here right now. Because I'm the baby, She rolled her eyes. Like I said, overprotective.
I may put you to work if you come to after hours.
Lazar returned, a serious look on his face.
What are you two cooking up over there? Just a friendly visit,
Vax said. Maybe even a job, Alexa added. Vax studied Lazar to see how the other shifter would take that. He didn't want Lazar to feel uncomfortable or threatened. Lazar nodded.
I have news. Well, the news is actually on her way over. Not willingly, I might add.
Vax gave him a quizzical look.
Natalia was in Houston, at the apartment of one of her father's cohorts. Her father has no idea. What do you mean?
Vax didn't want to believe what his mind was processing.
The kidnapping was a ruse. She's got a friend with her, actually one of her cousins. Has a gravelly voice. Sound familiar? Son of a bitch!
Vax jumped to a stand and paced the room.
She's going straight to her father, and I'm going straight to Callie.
Lazar cocked his head.
And? They were trying to arrange a merger, an alliance. They wanted to seal it with her hand in marriage.
Oh, she's a crafty one, isn't she? Alexa flipped her hair behind her shoulder. Let me have a visit with her? The glint in Alexa's eye told Vax the visit would involve bodily harm, Natalia's. Lazar shook his head, as if he was used to Alexa's antics.
My sisters are on the feisty side, especially this redhead. Your little kidnap victim will be here in less than 30 minutes. No.
Vax shook his head at Alexa.
I don't want to resolve it this way. Christ, my sisters will absolutely love you.
He wondered about his invitation to Alexa. Put her in a room with his sisters, there'd be more energy than he could handle.
Sisters?
Lazar gave him a look.
Only Vela's in Dallas with you. The others are in Europe with your brother, or as your family calls him, Rafe. Unless, of course, you're including your visiting half-sisters.
Vax studied Lazar.
You know a lot about us. It's a good thing you're family.
He was impressed with the amount of knowledge Lazar had revealed to him over the last few days.
Everyone has got to be good at something. You're trading liquor and other goods. I trading knowledge and other things. Yes, I've heard about the other things.
Even though Vax hadn't known they were cousins until he arrived, the Arsenault tribe's reputation was common knowledge. They waited on the veranda, drinking sweet tea, far sweeter than Vax would have preferred, but he wasn't going to complain. The afternoon view was beautiful, and he knew the sunset would be stunning again, but this time he wanted to see it while he was driving northwest. He'd much rather see Callie than the most stunning of sunsets. Every moment that he'd been here, he cursed himself for being a fool and not having made her his. 3 cars and 2 SUVs pulled up. 3 large shifters exited one of the SUVs, red-faced and far from composed. Natalia flew out of the vehicle, her hair in disarray, her face a mask of fury. Pouty and sullen, Natalia and her equally morose accomplice pulled away from the Arsenault shifters surrounding them. "Don't touch me!" She snapped at one of them when he put a hand on her elbow to guide her up the staircase. Then her eyes landed on Vax. Her expression changed. She turned sickly sweet, sweeter than the tea he'd been drinking. "Vax!" She ran his way. "You have no idea how happy I am to see you. These—" She looked at the Arsenault as if they were compost. "These gentlemen were kind enough to save me and my friend from the kidnappers."
Ma chérie, you are too precious.
Lazar couldn't contain his laughter. The gleam in Lazar's eye made Vax wonder what was on his mind. "And who are you?" Natalia looked down her nose at the man who towered above her.
Lazar Arsenault, the man who will return your naughty derriere to your father, and if you misbehave, I'll be the man who spanks it.
He winked at her. "You'll do no such thing!" Natalia turned red, then scoffed, though a look of fear crossed her face. Clearly, she knew about Lazar Arsenault and his reputation.
I believe I'll take you up on that offer.
Vax smiled.
Will you be so kind as to have whoever delivers her to her father explain the circumstances of my refusal? Tell him I cannot abide the idea of having a mate who practices stunts like this.
Vax had no intention of telling them he already knew who his mate was. They'd find out when he invited them to the wedding. If he invited them. Hell, who was he kidding? He liked these newfound cousins of his. He was definitely going to invite them. He would forge a relationship he was sure his mother would have wanted. He wondered if it would piss his father off, and part of him hoped so. The old man certainly had his share of crap coming his way. Vax hugged Alexa, then shook Lazar's hand.
I'm glad I came out. As am I.
Lazar smiled.
You won't be a stranger, will you? You're coming to the next council meeting, right?
Vax asked him. He fully intended to introduce his sisters and his tribe to his New Orleans family. "You can't leave me!" Natalia stomped her foot.
Vax Tiero, you get back here right now.
Thank God she wasn't his problem anymore. Lazar's laughter at Natalia's indignation was the last sound Vax heard as he got into his car. He headed west, hoping he'd have no interference from the law or any speed traps. With any luck, he'd be in time. He texted Vela.
Is Callie working tonight?
Her response made him smile. Chapter 22. Callie went through the motions quickly. Makeup, done. Hair, done. She stayed in her jeans, though, leaving the dress on the hanger. She arrived early, really early, at after dark. She went in with purpose. She had a damn good reason for being early, and this might be the last time she got to do this. She slipped out of the dressing room. After dark was a graveyard, but she wasn't taking any chances. She ran along the perimeter of the dance floor, double-checking, making sure there was no one around. She drew up short, stopping in front of the door to Sanctuary. Please let it not be locked. Please be unlocked. Please, please. Without pausing, she reached for the handle and yanked on it. The door opened. She darted inside and pulled it shut behind her. As always, she paused a moment to let her vision adjust to the dimness in the undergrowth. A shape appeared behind the leaves. Holding her breath, Callie stepped closer. Please be him, and not that bitch of a tigress that could have killed me, or the other male tiger that he almost got into it with. Please. The shape stepped out, large, definitely not the female. Now she had to be sure it wasn't the other male, especially when she knew the tigers could come into the viewing area. She wasn't about to get any further from the door until she knew for sure. Is it you? The tiger's head tilted, his broad chest, white with dark stripes, melded with the shadows. He stepped closer, then leapt onto the boulder he usually sat on. She looked at his eyes. Him! Thank God, she whispered, approaching him. I can't believe it. You're here. When did you get back? I've been worried. I was off for a few days, she shrugged. She didn't feel like confessing how drunk she'd gotten or how Rafe was helping her. All that mattered now was she was with her tiger and he was safe. You saved my life, you know. The tiger's head cocked to the other side. I love how you know, or at least seem to know what I'm saying. She took a step closer. Or maybe you're faking it really well, she laughed. I don't mean faking it. I mean I'm taking liberties with my interpretations. She could have sworn the tiger's lips curled the slightest bit, like a smile. Or a snarl? No, not her tiger. No way. An overwhelming urge to touch him came over her. Come closer. She walked to the bars. The tiger leapt off the tall boulder and stood on the rock in front of the bars. Don't laugh. Okay, did I really just tell a tiger not to laugh? She had. Geez, what's next? Anyway, I was going to say, don't laugh, but I want to hug you. It may be the last time I get to hug you. Probably the last time I get to see you. Vax froze. His blood felt like it had icicles flowing through it. What the hell did she mean it would be the last time she got to hug or see him? What the hell had happened? He'd just driven in and told Vela not to bother him, that he'd be in Sanctuary and didn't want to be disturbed. He'd hurried back here to make his claim, to take his mate as his, and now she was telling him she wasn't going to see him again?
Rafe.
It had to be Rafe. Was Rafe trying to claim Callie? There was no way Vax was going to have that. He'd kill his brother first. His eyes narrowed. She wrapped her arms around him, the bars blocking her. The bars stopped him, too, from getting close to her. He felt wetness against his cheek and, turning his head, glimpsed the shimmer of tears on her face. His tiger made a plaintive sound deep in Vax's chest. Vax pulled away from her, leapt onto the tall boulder, bunched his muscles, and lunged across the water, clearing the moat, his hind legs almost missing their target. He quickly pulled them upward, closer to his body, and landed in front of her. Open-mouthed, the tears still shiny on her face, she stared at him, then burst into laughter and wrapped her arms around his neck. Callie stared at the tiger, thrilled he had crossed the moat, not in the least scared. His light blue eyes gazed at her, intelligence behind them, even emotion. Yes, that had to be emotion in those light eyes. She should feel foolish for not being afraid of him, but she didn't. This was her tiger. They had a bond. It was unbreakable. And she'd never see him again after tonight. The moment she quit, she'd never be allowed to see him again. She could always come as a guest, but then she'd never have one-on-one time with him. Tears filled her eyes. She buried her face in his chest. "I'm going to miss you. You have no idea how much." Her tiger placed his head on hers, tucking her under his chin. She sat there, tucking her legs under her chin, safely ensconced under the tiger's mighty head. His heartbeat was strong against her body, his fur and body heat a source of warmth and comfort. When she heard the cracking sound, cracking, light, barely audible, she thought the tiger was stretching his back legs. When the tiger moved, she nestled closer, shivering slightly because he'd pulled his fur away from her. She hoped he wasn't leaving her. She opened her eyes. "Vax!" She jumped back. "Where's... what... how?" She stared at him. He was here, her boss. Her tiger was gone. "One minute I'm holding the tiger, the next... this." She looked into Vax's eyes. They shone the same intelligent blue as the tiger's. No, she was losing it. She shook her head to clear it, knowing damned well that wouldn't change a thing. Vax was here with her, not her tiger.
"I think you know."
It hit her with the devastation of a wrecking ball. She raised her fists and pounded on his chest. "How could you? How could you?" Chapter 23. Vax was confused. He caught Callie's wrists and secured her hands to keep her from striking him like a helicopter gone awry. What had gotten into her? "You leave town with her after kissing me, and now—" He burst into laughter. This was about Natalia? Not about Rafe? Not about his tiger. She wasn't rejecting him and his tiger or his shifter ways. She was just jealous? She jerked one hand free from his and raised it to punch him. If he hadn't been as quick as he was, she'd have caught him in the face. He captured her fist midair just before it clipped his jaw.
"Wait. Callie, baby, wait."
"No, you bastard! You must know how I feel about you." Her eyes were wild. Dark flames of fury burned in their depths.
"I do. I wasn't out of town with her. It's a long story. Please, listen."
She yanked on her hand, clearly intent on striking him again. He only had one option. He took both wrists and held them tight with one hand, pulling her body close. He brought his head down and locked his lips onto hers, branding her mouth harshly and brooking no argument. He claimed it as his as surely as he had claimed her heart the first time he met her. He claimed it with the desperation his tiger had felt at the threat of losing the only mate he had ever wanted. His tongue took her lips and mouth with the same intensity he fully intended to take every part of her. Their tongues danced an ancient dance, one that would precede the ultimate taking and giving. A moan rose coming from her mouth, flowing into his. He growled, pulled back, and twined his hands in her hair.
"Done?"
Her reply was throaty. "I haven't even started." She freed her hands and wrapped them around his neck. Raking her fingernails over his scalp, she pulled his head down, locking her lips onto his. "All these weeks, all the stuff I've shared with... that was you?" He nodded.
"That's when I fell in love with you. That's when I knew you had to be with me. You had to be mine. Come with me."
He took her hand and led her toward the door the shifters used to enter Sanctuary. Callie followed Vax into a cave. He pressed a button, and a part of the cave's wall moved, allowing them entrance to Sanctuary. "No tigers in here?" The words slipped out of her mouth before she could stop them.
Other than me?
His bright blue eyes glistened with amusement in the darkness. "You really are him. You are." She put her hand on Vax's cheek. "You're the one."
I am the one, the only one.
He pulled her close to his chest. His arms were steel bands, locking her in the only place she'd ever really wanted to be. She heard his tiger growl deep within him. His eyes glowed blue with a hint of amber flames. There was no dimming his tiger's intensity, no controlling his emotions. He took her face in his hands, cupping her cheeks. He locked eyes with her.
You know what I mean when I say that?
I know you're the only one I want, the only one I'll ever want, and you feel the same for me. And you have a tiger inside you that loves me too. He nodded, an amazed look on his face. I don't have to lose you. I thought you would fire. A tear made its way down her face, aiming for the corner of her mouth. He touched his lips to hers gently, tasting the salty tear.
What did you think?
I thought when Martin told you about what I did. She licked her lips. His eyes were glued on her tongue as it traveled over her lower lip. He didn't tell you, did he?
He told Vela.
Vax shrugged.
But I already knew you'd been sneaking into Sanctuary.
I thought Natalia.
She's no one. There's never been anyone else since I met you. There never will be anyone else. Tell me you feel the same way.
You know I do.
I need you, to be in you, to be one with you.
His voice was gruff, coming from deep in his throat.
Now.
The reaction in her body was instantaneous. It was as if someone had plucked a guitar string that connected her brain to her nipples, to her clit, to the core of her. Her channel began to weep moisture, dropping the slickness in its haste to make ready. She reached for his shirt and unbuttoned it, pulling on the fabric, as desperate to have him inside her as he sounded like he was. Vax wasn't waiting for further invitation. He groaned, shredding her clothing with his claws before he could contain the tiger. He tugged on her body, bringing it close to his while her hands ripped at his shirt and pants. His lips met hers, frantic, eager, and hungry. His tongue wrapped around hers, then found hers taking control of his, coaxing it with a caress that was hot and sexy. He dropped to the soft undergrowth, pulling her body on top of his. Her thighs were open, and his length rubbed along her sex, feeling the moisture and the heat she had for him deep inside, making him want her even more. Her moan pulled on him, gripping his tiger fiercely. He fought to breathe while his hands cupped her breasts, allowing their fullness to overflow, pushing them together while she rested on his cock. He needed more than this. He needed much more than this. His fingers plucked at her nipples, and she pushed up to a sit. She moved her hips, making her pussy spread, her lips practically cupping his cock.
Callie,
he groaned.
You're too much. You're soaked. God, you're so wet for me, you're dripping on my cock.
She wriggled on top of him, her slickness rubbing him, making him crave to drive himself deep inside. She leaned forward, her hands on the ground on either side of his chest, her breasts like ripe fruit, tantalizing his mouth. He flicked his tongue at one of her nipples, enjoying the feel of the bud hardening even more. Raising his head, he sucked it in, pulling at it, nipping at it with his teeth, while he took her other nipple between his fingertips, tugging, pulling, pinching it, rolling it between his fingers. "Oh, yes," she moaned, trembling under his touch. He released her nipples, put his hands under her ass, and raised her. His cock, released, sprang to attention, rubbing at her entrance. He pushed her down a notch, feeling her heat and the entrance to her core against his head. His cock and his tiger both strained to be free of his restraint. Driving her down swiftly, he raised his hips with a sudden thrust, piercing her body, filling her with his hardness, stretching her to accommodate him. She gasped, her head flew back, and a primeval moan escaped from between her lips. Her nipples were offerings to the heavens as she leaned back and propped herself with bent knees and an arched back. Her tightness clenched him, not releasing. Using her hands, she raised and lowered herself over and over, impaling her body with his cock, sucking him into her slickness, rocking her hips, rolling her body. He reached for the little hooded nub housed in her red velvet, uncovered the tiny pleasure core, pinched it, then placing his fingers on it, moved it in furious circles. She dropped lower on him as her legs spread more and her nails raked stripes down his abdomen, tiny scars on top of the scars he had from fighting. Passion flaring in the deepness of her dark eyes, she pumped herself on him. A hiss escaped him as his cock filled to a painful engorged state. His tiger was roaring deep in Vax's soul and mind.
I have to make you mine, forever.
He barely managed to get the words out before he flipped her over and, without bothering to pause, drove himself deep into her. Her channel began quivering around him, fluttering, clenching, pulling, and milking his passion to the surface.
Are you mine?
He roared the words out.
Forever,
Callie gasped. She couldn't have answered him any other way. It wouldn't have covered her feelings as well as that one word did. A searing sensation gripped her neck, followed by the sweetest pleasure as she realized he'd driven his teeth into her. The unraveling of her passion was sudden and unexpected. She yelled his name out, and it seemed a part of her soul flew out and above her as she climaxed in a tidal wave of desire and screams. He shoved his hardness in deeper, pumping, and the final time he gripped her waist and buried himself to the hilt. His flesh against hers, melding into her as one. A fierce growl erupted in his throat as his heat filled her. He licked at her neck where he'd bitten her. Chapter 24. Callie picked up her shredded clothing from the floor in sanctuary.
I don't have anything to wear,
she giggled, brushing the leaves from her body.
There's a secret way to my place. You can borrow my t-shirt until we get there. It's long enough. After that, you'll have 2 options. Maybe 3.
He ticked them off on his fingers.
1, you can wait until I send someone to your place to get clothes. 2, you can borrow some clothes from one of my sisters. 3, you can never leave my bed.
He pulled her close to him, kissing her lips, his blue eyes gleaming and his tongue capturing hers.
How about I take option number 3?
She wrapped her arms around his waist, enjoying the way his large body made hers feel. She was completely unself-conscious with him, enjoying the way their bodies fit together. She turned serious.
I have a dress in the... Oh my God, I'm late for work.
You're the boss's mate. You don't have to worry about that. In fact, you don't have to go to work at all. Ever.
I won't quit my job. Anyway, I need to cover my shift tonight. I don't want to screw the rest of them over.
Vax kissed the tip of her nose.
You're not really late. Maybe I'll make an announcement at the meeting today.
The more he thought of the idea, the better he liked it. There was no better way to smash that archaic code to pieces than by making his relationship with Callie fully public. Let any visiting shifters spread the rumors. Let the old world Tiero shifters come to him if they had an issue with it. He had no plan to go to them to ask for permission for this. Callie was his mate. If they didn't like it, they could try to wrestle control from him. That included his father. He escorted his sexy, flushed, bootylicious woman to his apartment using the back way that only he had access to. I'm not going to quit working. I mean it. I like this job. I want it. He smacked her ass, then grabbed her hip and pressed her against the wall, his cock nestled between her ass cheeks.
That's what I love about you. That independence, that fierceness.
She'd make the perfect alpha's mate.
Fine, you keep your job.
As if you have a choice. She turned her head and laughed low and sexy close to his ear. His cock and his tiger sprang to attention, ready for more of their mate. Chapter 25. Callie hustled out of the meeting, her cheeks red, redder than her dress. She just knew it. She hadn't anticipated Vax would actually do that, pull her out in front of everyone at the meeting and tell them all. Anna and Sophie had clapped the loudest. Thankfully, Vela and Lila hadn't seemed upset. In fact, their smiles had seemed genuine. Natalia was noticeably gone. Callie had asked Vax where she was in a whisper. He'd grimaced.
Gone, for good, thankfully.
She rounded the corner and ran right into a wide chest, and it wasn't the chest she'd left scratches on when they'd made love the second time against the wall. Rafe! She glanced around for Vax. She didn't want Vax to think there was anything at all between her and Rafe. Rafe, I have to tell you, I just can't. It's your brother. I can't. You're an awesome guy. Seriously, but...
I get it. I already put that together. I was just coming to say goodbye.
What do you mean?
I've already told my sisters, now I'm telling you. It's time I went home. There's really nothing here for me.
She felt sad for him, but his life and his relationship with Vax weren't anything she could control. She couldn't force the two brothers to have a relationship. She hugged him. Thank you for being a friend when I needed one. His eyes flashed a darker color, one she couldn't define, didn't understand, but also one that didn't matter. She was Vax's woman, forever, and that was exactly how she wanted it to be. Rafe walked off and was out of sight, lost in the crowd that was quickly filling the entrance. Vax heard every word. There was no way he couldn't have. He heard Callie's affirmation of their love, and he heard the pain in his brother's voice. Vela had been right. Rafe had fallen for Callie. Vax understood that completely. Callie was one of a kind, but she was his one of a kind. He tried to feel empathy for Rafe, but he wasn't sure he could. One thing Vax did feel: Rafe had redeemed himself by not trying to seduce her now that she and Vax were together. He'd done the right thing and had stepped away as soon as he'd realized she and Vax had bonded and she carried Vax's mark. He watched Callie greet the guests, and his tiger sighed deep in Vax's chest. They'd both found what they'd always missed. Epilogue. With the top down on the convertible, Vax pressed his foot on the gas pedal, eyeing the speedometer. He chanced a glance at Callie, appreciating the way she filled out her dress, while at the same time wanting to rip it off her and plunder the treasures within.
I really would like to take you to Europe to see the places I grew up. But we only have a few days off, so I was thinking I'd introduce you to my cousins in New Orleans.
I didn't know you had cousins in New Orleans. She pushed her hair away from her face.
Neither did I until recently.
His phone buzzed in his pocket. He took it out. She reached across, taking it from him. No, Vax, we're on vacation. She looked at the screen, then handed it back. You should take it. It's Vela. He tapped the wireless bud in his ear and smiled at Callie.
Hey, sis.
His smile vanished as he listened to her.
Who? What?
He sighed, and his fingers tapped a concerned beat on the steering wheel. At the end side of the line, in Dallas, he could hear Vela tapping on something, her nails making the usual rat-a-tat-tat. Odd how they both had the same habit.
Tell you what.
He looked at Callie again. There was no way in hell he wasn't taking these few days with her.
Why don't you have Lila look into it?
Tapping the bud to turn it off, he turned to Callie.
A shifter was trespassing on our territory. Gavin's contained him. He's not going anywhere. Lila can handle it while Vela runs after dark.
She leaned across and kissed him, her hand moving down his chest and over his abs.
We're crossing the state line,
he announced, his voice gruff with desire. I've never been naughty in Louisiana, she said as her hand traveled south. This has been Controversy, Shifters Forever Worlds, Always After Dark, Book 1. Written by Elle Thorne. Narrated by Megan Kelly. Copyright 2015 by Elle Thorne. Production copyright 2018 by Elle Thorne.